Do you feel like you see hate or a lot of hate or disdain for women in the incel community?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna lie. I mean, we do hate women. That's just the way it is. I mean, we have been shunned by women. We have been constantly rejected by women. We are ignored, or we are given stares of contempt. We are discriminated against on a regular basis. So it's very difficult for us to have like a. I mean, I know we are not entitled to all these things. We are not entitled to acceptance. We're not entitled to being friends with women or having relationships with women. But just on a human scale, right? Just receiving so much rejection on a daily basis, it makes incels resentful. It makes people resentful. People in our community resentful, and so we do, hate women for sure.
Hello, audience. Welcome to our Incel episode. So the truth is, we filmed this Incel episode several months ago now. We've kind of been sitting on this footage. We think this is a really fascinating episode that has a lot to add to the topic of incels and provide some pretty fundamental insights into incel psychology. This is our first episode where we've had someone on who could be considered part of a hate group. And that's part of the reason why we've delayed releasing this episode. We weren't quite sure how to present it in a way that didn't perpetuate the hate to as much a degree as possible. So the way we decided to do this is we're going to be going into the episode at a few key points and providing meta commentary from the future, from our position here in the future. Chris and Katie, do you want to say hi from the future?
Hello from the future.
Hi, I'm Chris, coming to you from the future.
Yes. Yeah, we're in the dark incel dystopia future where... Anyway... So we're going to come in 2 or 3 times and provide some meta commentary. Otherwise, we're just going to allow the episode to flow as it happened.
This episode has been edited. We took out some points that were seeming circular and cut out some places where we maybe phrased things redundantly and thought that they were boring. But we made a conscious choice not to remove any content because we found it objectionable. We think it's important that when a new hate ideology is in the world, that we understand it and know what we're dealing with. So that's why we've chosen to do a deep dive into incels today.
So, without further ado, please enjoy the show.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the Multiversity Project. Today we're going to be joined by a very special guest to cover a very serious and controversial topic. So, with the success of the recent Joker film coming on the heels of an epidemic of mass shootings in the US, the cultural dialogue has shifted. We've seen renewed interest in a particular kind of man, a man who doesn't fit in, an alienated man, and a man who failed to connect romantically and sexually with women.
Many commentators have noted the similarities between Joker and incels. Incel being short for involuntary celibate, a label for an online community of men who have not had sexual or romantic success with women. Many incels follow the Blackpill ideology, which emphasizes the importance of sexuality, but views sexual opportunity as largely determined by genetic factors, leaving some men completely hopeless.
The incel community has hit the news a few times, as some self-described incels have carried out mass murders. While violence is certainly not the norm or condoned by the majority of incels, it is difficult to ignore the undertones of animosity towards women, self-hatred, extreme alienation, and suicidal ideation that are common on some incel forums.
Today, we have a self-described incel and blackpiller joining us on the show. He'll be remaining anonymous and going by John Doe. Welcome to the show, John.
Thank you.
And the plan for today is we will start with an interview segment where we're going to ask you some questions and give you some space to articulate your worldview. After that, we'll enter into a conversation where we'll offer some challenges to the Blackpill worldview. And then we'll get into a bigger picture discussion about what the Blackpill worldview can tell us about society and what we might do about it.
Right. Okay.
So John, to start off, without saying anything that'll reveal your identity, can you tell us a bit about yourself and how you first got into the Incel and Blackpill movement?
So, I was first introduced to the Incel community and the Blackpill ideology or philosophy, if you want to call it that, late last year, or I would say like mid last year in 2018. So that was the first time I encountered this ideology. But before that, I'd already known about the dichotomy of the blue pill and the red pill, and I was familiar with the red pill mindset and the red pill movement that's that was already quite active in the manosphere. Then people just started mentioning incels, the word incel, more and more. And initially, I just wanted to not take them into consideration all that much, and I even wanted to shun them because I just got the initial vibe that they were losers, and I had no place in my mindset for that kind of thinking. But that was because I was more red-pilled and even blue-pilled to some extent. But after that, slowly, I started frequenting their subreddit, which was called Brain Cells. It's now banned, but at that time it was pretty active, and it was a successor to the Are Incels subreddit, which was banned. So I started frequenting Brain Cells, and the stuff they discuss on Brain Cells and the stuff they discuss on TRP, the subreddit TRP, which stands for The Red Pill. Those things are very similar, the topics that are being discussed. So I fit in pretty easily. But another thing that I noticed is that once I started frequenting the incel community, what I noticed is that they were very brutally honest with themselves, which is what I really admired. And I've always wanted to be, I've always held myself to that standard. I really wanted to remove my cognitive biases and look at reality as objectively as I possibly could. And by cleansing my thinking of all kinds of subjectivity or biases, I would be able to arrive at a pure truth about how the world works, and that was what I was always about. And I take pride in it even today, even though incels are called very extremist or very ideological. I'm in fact, a lot of the things that they do discuss in our communities, it's very looking straight into the abyss, looking straight into the truth of the matter, without any kind of any strings to hold you back, any kind of no coping mechanisms, no padding your brakes, no euphemisms, no sometimes even a lack of civility, but we just say things head on, and that's what I really admire about this community. And so once I discovered that, once I realized that and this is a place I could really get myself into, I just started commenting, and that was around mid-2018. And after that, I quickly became an active member of the R Brain Cells subreddit. And eventually I discovered incels.co. At that time, it was called incels.me. And then they changed their domain to incels.is, and then they changed it to .co. And right now it's .is and .co. I started to become more active in the .co community as well. And so that is something little different than the subreddits. It's different from Reddit in the sense that the rules are a little bit laxed. And Reddit, if you are on Reddit, and Reddit recently updated its terms of usage, and you really have to, you cannot talk about killing, you cannot talk about, there are certain things that you just can't do. You can't be misogynist, you can't be this, you can't be that, you can't phrase things in a way that can come across as bullying or stuff like that. But in .co, a lot of those restrictions are lifted. I mean, yeah, you can get banned, and many people do get banned, but I was able to find that this was a more free place, a free community where discussion could occur with more flexibility and freedom, and that's what I really admired, because right around the time of 2018, I was noticing that social media communities were becoming more strict and in terms of their rules, and people were, in general, had become very touchy, and they would just ban people for the slightest of inconveniences, and that really hurt me, because I've always been a person of free speech, and to see how we in the Incel community really uphold that to a large extent, not to a full extent, but to a large extent, and that's what really appeals to me, and that's why I really respect the people who I'm talking with and chatting with day in and day out. And so since then, I have not really looked back, and I've been an active member of the .co community, and I've a lot of posts. I've done a lot of posts, and I post every day. Sometimes I chat, and sometimes I even voice chat over Discord. So yeah.
Do you think that any kind of restriction is useful, or do you think that there should be no restrictions at all?
So if there are truly no restriction, any virtual community, any forum would turn into a shit posting sub, right?
Gotcha.
So I just feel that some rules are okay. But once the rules really start to prevent people from expressing ideas, prevent people from expressing their opinions, and that's when it has to stop. Like, that's my opinion. But that being said, there are rules in incels.co. There are plenty of rules. There's lots of stuff you can't say, otherwise you'll be banned. Lots of stuff which will bring you warnings. So, yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Cool, yeah, thank you, John. I want to take things to the basics a bit. Can you maybe just explain to us in the audience, like, what is an incel?
Right. An incel is a person who has trouble attracting a mate. So that's the very basic definition. That's as simple as I can get. Has trouble attracting mate, can't attract mates. Also is probably, and on the social hierarchy, I would say this person is on the lower tiers. And probably not bottom of the barrel, but in some aspects of the social hierarchy or the socioeconomic hierarchy, this person is probably not too high up, as well as just being unable to attract mates for whatever reason.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I just want to make a little distinction. So it's more an incel is someone who is unable to attract a mate. It's a little bit more intense than just having trouble, right?
Yes, you're unable to attract a mate. Yeah, you're unable to attract a mate. You have tried and you've put effort into it, and it just doesn't work. Or I mean, even if you don't put effort into it, I mean, even if you did potentially put effort into it, it probably wouldn't work out because I mean, you just don't have what it takes. I mean, that person doesn't have what it takes to attract and keep a mate.
Okay. I mean, a point of confusion for me a little bit is when you say can't attract a mate, is an incel someone who can't attract a mate for a long-term relationship, or is an incel someone who can't get sex at all, let's say?
I would say not get sex at all, both short-term and long-term. Obviously, long-term relationships don't always start off with sex, but this person would not get the approval necessary for the other person to enter into a relationship with that person. So that basic approval is not that the incel cannot earn that approval from other people. That's why that person is an incel. And most incels, as we think of it in the incel community, are men. What we think is that only a very, very small finite, or probably no women can be incel. How we think of it is that if you're a woman, you're always going to be able to get men on some level, maybe not high tier men, but definitely normies or maybe even low tier men. If you are healthy enough for intercourse and you're somewhat sane in mind, and even if you have some psychiatric disorders, it can be forgiven. So the way we think about it is because men are sexually more thirsty relative to women. Although women can have high sex drives, that compared to men's sex drives is far, far lower. So what happens is that men inevitably end up trying to get with women across all levels of looks, social, or economic hierarchies. And so it's very difficult for a woman to end up being incel. Because at the very least, she can at least get sex, whereas we can't. So, yeah.
Okay. You're starting to get into some talk of like human sexual behavior that is reminding me a little bit of red pill stuff like you mentioned. Would you want to go over kind of like the red pill and incel ideology? It's not just the basic definition, but like there seems to be more to it than just incels are people who can't have sex. Like the community seems to have some viewpoints.
I mean, the communities have viewpoints. I mean, when it comes to the manosphere, most, like whether it's incel, red pill guys, or the MGTOW guys, or the true force loneliness guys, I mean, most of us agree about women's nature. It's just that we don't agree on how we should deal with it. For example, incels will inevitably either do two things. They will try to get plastic surgery or some cosmetic procedure to improve their looks because they understand that looks is what makes attraction, like looks is what drives attraction. So what they'll try to do is either they'll get surgery and improve their looks. This is called looks maxing. Or what they'll try to do is they'll just give up entirely because they might think that, oh, I mean, it's too much for me. I have too many flaws. I just can't do this. The sexual marketplace or the dating and the marriage marketplace is just too unforgiving for me. I just can't do it. I'm just gonna LDAR, which stands for lay down and rot. What this means is that you just basically give up and you stop trying and you just focus on like whatever. You just focus on instant gratification, like stuff like eating fast food, or like video games, or maybe masturbation, like porn, stuff like that. And just forget about the entire the dating marketplace that exists. So those are two choices, but compared to what the incels will do, compared to this, consider the red pill guys. What the red pill guys will do is they will have an entire regimen of going to the gym. Like the red pill guys believe that in the face of all this harshness from the sexual marketplace, what they can do is if they up their effort and they can become more masculine and they work harder and they improve and they keep on improving themselves, they can get somewhere. They can achieve some success in the sexual marketplace. So what this means is that they'll try to mimic the behaviors of very dark triad masculine guys, like these sociopathic masculine guys, and they'll try to make themselves look masculine. They'll try to grow a beard maybe, and they'll try to build a lot of muscle. And it's just the difference between the black pill and the red pill community is that the red pill community won't entirely give in to the idea that it's all about like genetics and looks, but what they'll think is that it's more about behavior, and that if behavior can be amended and can be modified, that they too stand to have the same chance of success that the most dimorphic, the most good-looking of models and these high-status men can hope to achieve. The difference is primarily in the way we deal with things. The red pills are more about behavioral determinism, and they have an internal locus of control where they believe that they can actually, through their efforts, through their self-improvement, through their philosophy, through their personal growth, they can actually influence the outcome of their life. Whereas the black pillars will think that, yeah, it's definitely a bit of that. They'll acknowledge that status and money and career can help, but they will primarily say that it's more about like genetics. So they'll try to fraud their genetics. And how can they do this? They'll probably be doing looks maxing, which is like they'll try to improve their skin. They'll be using tretinoin. They'll try to make their eyebrows thicker. They'll embark on a cosmetic regimen, not unlike what a female might do, like a female who is really like looks obsessed.
So these are black pillars who are trying to...
Yeah, I mean, these guys acknowledge the black pill, which is genetic determinism, versus the red pill, which is biological determinism. Genetic determinism, so the only way they can make progress in the sexual marketplace is by getting some plastic surgery to fraud their genetics, right? And so what they'll do is they'll get surgeries, they'll get orthognathic surgeries, which is like jaw surgery. They like break your jaw or like break a part of your skull and move it around, and then they use titanium to screw it back together, and they can reshape your face that way. Or maybe they'll get implants, or maybe they'll get this is mostly rare, leg lengthening surgery to increase your height. But that's pretty rare because leg lengthening surgery has a high chance of leaving a person crippled. So they probably won't do that. But they'll try to do other things. They'll even take steroids, these kinds of things, maybe even HGH. So they'll try to do all sorts of things to fraud their genetics.
So the way I understand it is, if I'm understanding it correctly, is that the red pill and the black pill are two different things, and you're making sort of a distinction between those things. It sounds like the red pill they're kind of the same philosophy, except the red pill has like a growth mindset, and the black pill has kind of a fixed mindset. But there are some black pillars who you've described as kind of, or they do this thing called looks maxing, right? Where they're still black pillars because they still think there's this genetic determinism going on, but they still kind of have an internal locus of control. They still believe that they can do something to affect
they have some internal locus of control. The way they're poised is that they still have that chance to transcend their current position in the hierarchy to a higher position and manage to land like a mate of their satisfaction. So that's why you have this growth mindset. So it's like a mixture of the red and black pills.
Okay, that makes sense. I guess, John, I'm wondering, can you maybe, if you can imagine like a blue pill guy, a red pill guy, and a black pill guy, and they each had to give like a one-sentence elevator pitch about dating, like what would each one say?
Yeah, that's a good question, actually. The blue pill guy would say, just be yourself. The red pill guy would say, look, the world is tough, but you can make progress if you keep on improving. And the black pill guy would say, whether you make progress or not, like, it depends on who the black pill guy is talking to. If the black pill guy is talking to a person who is, like, pretty good looking, then they would say, yeah, there's nothing to worry about. You can just do whatever you want because your looks have already determined your life. And so the black pill guy might say you could be a neo-Nazi to the guy he's talking to. I mean, depending on the looks level. If he's a Chad, then he would say, you're a Chad, you have nothing to worry about, you can just do whatever you want, you can behave badly, you can behave out of character, you can behave poorly, and it would still not matter because you have got your life made. You have nothing to worry about. Bro, go out and have some fun. That's what he would say.
So a Chad is just to clarify, Chad is somebody, a good looking
Chad is
male.
a good looking male.
Yeah.
Tall, model looks, yeah. Good jaw, clean cut jawline, as well as good brow ridge, good facial projection, good cheekbones, good eye area.
Yes, I want to let John finish this question. So what would the Blackpill guy say to the incel?
Depending, so to Chad, he would just say, yeah, go be Chad, like go do whatever the hell you want to do because the world is your oyster. And to a normie, he would say, maybe you can ascend, but you need these surgeries. And maybe to an incel or a low tier person, just say it's over. And yeah, these are the three responses I can think of.
It's over as in just like, just give up now, just stop trying.
Yeah, it was just stop trying.
Okay, I think that that clarifies a lot.
I mean, basically the blue pill is like a denial of a lot of the uncomfortable truths. It has an optimism mindset. It has a just world bias fallacy, where it assumes that if you're going to act badly, you're probably going to get what's coming to you, and if you're going to be a good Samaritan, you're also going to be rewarded. I mean, certainly that's not always the case, and because a lot of bad things do happen, and a lot of bad people do get away with the bad things they do, and they reap rewards. But sometimes I can acknowledge that bad people do get what's coming to them, and good people do get rewarded. But the thing is that the blue pill always assumes a optimistic mindset that the world is fair or is relatively just, and that good people win in the end, and that nice guys can win.
So the black pill would view the blue pill as being overall pretty naive, and even the red pill also is a little naive, right?
The red pill is naive, but not as naive as the blue pill. The blue pill is just denial of bad things happening. The blue pill is a reinforcement of the status quo and reinforcement of mainstream ideas. And the black pill is taking a heretic's view on life and like peeling back all the layers of the contemporary culture and seeing things from the ground up, like straight from the fundamentals of the primal mentality of human beings, and just looking at every bit of everything critically in an open mind and seeing how things are actually judged. So that's the black pill.
Yeah. This is useful. Right now we're painting out a picture, so we're going to be challenging some of these ideas later in the conversation. But for now, I think this is a good time to get into Chad and Stacy. So in the incel community and the black pill community, there's a lot of characters that you guys talk about to kind of illustrate points. So you want to explain to us who are Chad and Stacy?
Yeah, so these are a sexual caste, right? Essentially, we kind of have like a caste system and a hierarchy where we have Chads, normies or brads, and then we have incels. And I mean, we have normies, lower tier normies, higher tier normies, Chadlites, and then Chads. But like grossly speaking, it's Chad, Brad, incel. And the female equivalent of Chad is Stacy. And the female equivalent of normie is Becky, approximately. And the female equivalent of incel, basically we would say that there is no female equivalent, but I mean, if there is one, then that girl or woman would be called a femcel. But we don't think femcels exist because, I mean, females have so much sexual opportunity, and they just need to make a Tinder account. They don't really have to do too much. Like, compared to what men have to pull through to get something out of the dating market, women don't even have to put 1/10 the effort of that. So we don't advocate the concept of femcel. Femceldom. Sure, there are a few femcels. I mean, very, very, very few. But most women don't have to be femcel. Like, not like how we are. We are, like, enslaved to our condition. They have far more agency, is what we're saying. So, yeah.
Thank you. That's helpful. So what are Chad and Stacy like? Like, if you were writing a novel and they were characters, how do you describe them?
A Chad is a good-looking male model tier person. And some of the things that define Chad are, as I mentioned before, the cranial structure has to be very masculine. So it's like a warrior skull, essentially. I wish I could show you a picture, and maybe you guys can edit in a picture or two just show the dimorphism between like a Chad skull and a relatively feminine looking male skull, which we call a gay alien skull. So a masculine skull, a protruded brow ridge. You know those guys, right? Who have like a protruded brow ridge. Then deep-seated eyes, deep-set eyes, which are like hunter eyes. You know how wolves are, right? Wolves or panthers or like tigers, and how their eyes are like very piercing and hunter-like. So those kinds of eyes. But then there's of course a very good jawline and a forward-grown chin, and a very thin but sharp nose, like an aquiline nose, like which is typical of Europeans, and good cheekbones, protruded cheekbones to create the deep-seated eye area. And so that's the skull. And then you have a thick neck. You have a thick neck, and you have wide shoulders. You have wide shoulders. And then you have like a big chest, like not like you work out, but more like you have like a wide rib cage. Like your rib cage is big. So this means that you have good fighting prowess. Essentially, the things that make like a Chad are the things that grant a man natural fighting prowess. So wide shoulders, tall height, big hands, very thick digits, right? Thick fingers. And just a very masculine hand overall, like very rugged, and thick wrists, naturally big joints, which means that you can run long distances and your joints can take a lot more pounding, and tall height, which I mentioned before, and decent good sized hips. So yeah, these are some of the things that make a Chad a Chad. It's all about fighting prowess. So compared to a Chad, a Brad or a normie will not have all of these features, and will not have the kind of dimorphism Chad has, and maybe a Brad will not have the full facial projection that Chad has. Maybe he'll have one or two good features, but maybe he'll have one or two flaws to bring him down, right, on the looks level, and maybe he'll be a bit shorter. So I guess overall in the attractiveness scale, a Brad is a little down compared to a Chad. And then we have incels. Incels are primarily characterized by these people who are just pretty, like, they're unattractive to look at. Physically, they're unattractive. They don't have the jawline. They don't have the eye area necessary. Maybe they're ethnic. They're not white. And maybe they have like a bad mouth area, like with a bimaxillary protrusion, and they have a weak chin. That's the cranium, and maybe they don't have the brow ridge. And then their body's also lacking. Their frame is also pretty weak. Like they don't have maybe the kind of like the wide shoulders that the warrior phenotype, essentially. The warrior phenotype where you have like naturally wide shoulders and your lungs are pretty big because your rib cage is pretty big, and you can you can absorb a lot of oxygen and fight longer and hold your breath longer and not run out of breath and run for long distances. They won't have all that. They'll have a body type that's a lot more frail, and possibly not all of it. Not all incels have to have all of these attributes. Maybe an incel could be very tall, but maybe his face is pretty ugly, right? And so that person could become an incel simply by virtue of his face. Or on the contrary, maybe he has a very good face and he doesn't have the height, and then he becomes an incel on account of his poor stature and maybe his frame as well.
Okay, so just to summarize, I'm going to let you ask your follow-up question in a second, Katie, but just to summarize, John, so a Chad is one of these like super good-looking guys who can do really well with women quite easily.
Yes. So what happens is that they're so good-looking that they can override all the conditioning that's been endowed onto, like any person. If it's a woman, then if it's a gay Chad, then it's a guy. Like all the social conditioning and the rational thinking is overridden by the primal aspects of that person, or of women in this case, and then they just manage to get attracted to him, even though their better judgment may say that it would not be prudent of me to choose this person because maybe he's a drug addict, maybe he has a criminal record, or maybe he's a violent person with a history of domestic abuse. And so those things are transcended by like a pure primal mentality that just screams, oh, give me your sperm because I want my children to be just as strong and just as robust as you.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, got it. So that's Chad.
Yeah.
Brad is a guy who's still better looking than average.
I would think of it this way, like Chad, then Chad Light. 8 out of 10 would be Chad, a 7 out of 10 would be a Chad Light, 6.5 and above would be Chad Light. So Chad Light is good looking enough, and Chad is overwhelmingly good looking, like undisputedly good looking. And then we have a normie who's somewhat good looking. He's okay. He can pull some women, but maybe not high quality. And then there's like a low tier normie who's like a failed normie who can fall into inceldom, or maybe has to go through these really long spells where he doesn't really get any kind of action from women. And so, yeah. And that would be a low tier normie. Then there's incels, right? And then there are true cells. True cells are incels who are like absolutely irredeemable. Like incels can make progress and maybe they can become normies or chadlights with surgery. But if you have like a true cell, for a true cell, there is absolutely no hope whatsoever. I mean, you're so ugly, or you have such a defect, like maybe you have a non-functional penis, or maybe you're just too short. Maybe you're like 5'2". So there's just no hope for you. So those are true cells. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, John. I think Katie had a follow-up question.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, in this worldview, like you mentioned things about race, and I saw that a lot on the incel forums too. It seems like there's this idea that in the incel community that European men are more attractive or something
Yes.
like that.
Yes.
I'm wondering if you could explain from that perspective, like how.
I mean, the Chad archetype, right? The Chad caste, right? The caste that we have, it's based on European beauty. So that alone should tell you, like Chads, and then there are black Chads who are called Tyrones, and there are ethnic Chads who are sometimes called Chad Preets. If you're Indian or if you're like Middle Eastern, they're called Chadams. Yeah, or Chadriguez if you're like Latin American or like Spanish or whatever. Yeah, so there are variants of this, but the idea of Chad is essentially European, where you have to have a certain amount of facial projection to be beautiful. And European people, like Caucasians, possess most of the facial projection of all the races I have seen. I mean, sure, blacks have bimacular protrusion, and they'll have like a bulbous nose or something. But in terms of projection, and like projection of the brow ridge, projection of the cheekbones, and projection of the jaw, like it's all about European beauty. And so this is what we hold as standard in the incel community.
Okay, but it's not really you guys that are like laying out the standard and saying this is how it should be. You guys are kind of just saying like it's unfortunate, but this is how it is, right?
Well, this is how it is because we see it all across the world, right? I mean, if you go to any a non-white country, like in the third world, you'll see that white people are worshipped everywhere, right? Which a lot of low-tier white men try to take advantage of. They try to go to the Southeast Asian countries like the Philippines or Indonesia or Vietnam, and if they can't find a woman in their own country, they'll just go there and pick a woman from there, and the woman there is just delighted to be a wife to this low-tier white person because white man because even a low-tier white man is such an upgrade from the average men in their country. That's how it's considered. So, this just gives an indication of the hierarchy that exists, right? Not just looks hierarchy, it's also socioeconomic hierarchy, but I think looks are also a lot of it because, in the Philippines, white men are very much revered, as they are as well in other countries like Vietnam and Indonesia. Okay. And also in China and Japan. Japan has a lot of white people, I've noticed. Has a lot of white people.
Okay, this is something we're definitely going to have to get back to during our discussion and debate section of this. I want to keep moving through the interview.
So, according to John, white people have the most facial projection. And so white people are the most naturally beautiful. Because we're biologically programmed to be attracted to facial projection above all else. And we see evidence for this in the fact that Southeast Asian women go for ugly, nerdy white men who are incels in North America among white women.
Yeah, I feel like I should have challenged that more at the time, just kind of wanting to move on, but that is not the conclusion that I think makes the most sense to draw from the situation of Southeast Asian women marrying quote unquote lower tier white men. I don't think it has very much to do or anything to do really with their facial projection.
Yeah, I mean, when I look at that data, what comes to mind is that people from Western countries are more privileged and they can live in those Western countries. And if they marry somebody from a Southeast Asian country, then the person that they marry gets all of those privileges. So it doesn't seem like a attractiveness calculation. It seems like a money and status calculation.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, they're not necessarily like disconnected, right? Like, if white people, which they are like the richest and most powerful racial group on the planet, then it makes sense that standards for beauty will tend to aggregate around white features, and they will come to be found more attractive. But like, that's not a biologically pre-programmed thing. That's a sociocultural artifact.
Right.
Exactly. I would agree with that. You know, it's unfortunate that we have, as we were talking about on our gender bias episode, that, you know, we tend to associate, you know, like men with career and women with family or something like that. And so maybe there's an unconscious bias towards, you know, white people and status and power, because that's how things have historically shaken out. Obviously, I think there's some truth in that. And I think that's probably what makes what could explain this affinity that people have for white people.
Well, yeah, and I don't think it's purely like a unconscious association of white features with beauty that explains that phenomenon. I think part of it is more directly some women who are coming from very poor conditions where there's not a lot of opportunity to make a living that's going to provide for a family well, might be willing to marry men that they're not attracted to in order to escape dire circumstances. It's very sad, but it happens. And when I see a lot of those like men who go over to third world countries to try to find brides, it doesn't. I don't think it strikes me as like genuine love and attraction a lot of the time. It's a power relationship. It's a survival strategy for women who are escaping harsh conditions.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also for the record, like I don't think that facial projection is like the standard of attractiveness.
What is facial projection?
Facial projection is, I think it's basically just like how much your facial features generally stick out. Like not having a bigger nose, but like having a jaw that's more forward, like higher cheekbones, like more defined, as opposed to a flat face. And I just don't buy that always is seen as the most attractive. Like it kind of seems like this one section of what I would consider kind of the alt-right, far-right, like not all incels are right-wingers probably, but I think a lot of them are, finds it interesting to say, oh my gosh, women always find white men more attractive because they have facial projection and all these objectively more attractive features. Whereas if you just move one tiny subculture over, they're talking about how black men are more masculine because of da-da-da-da-da, and all the women are going for them. It strikes me as just something that serves the ideology. I don't know that there's really a lot of evidence that facial projection is a big standard, a big beauty standard.
Yeah, for sure. Like I don't really have any doubt that like if another racial group had colonized the world, like East Asian people or black people or something like that, then they would be considered to be the standard of beauty. And the incels would be talking about, I don't know, whatever features are associated with that race as being the universal standard of beauty. Chris and Katie, do you guys have burning follow-up questions? Or?
So I'd be curious, and I think the audience would be curious. Which thing makes you incel?
So what makes me an incel is I'm an ethnic incel. I mean, I'm not white, so that automatically reduces my sexual market value. Yeah, I'm pretty short. that's why I'm an incel. I'm 5'7", so that's not very very tall, and I'm also I have some health problems which I would like to not disclose. So that makes me an incel.
Cool. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So, Katie, do you want to read the misogyny question?
Sure. Yeah, so that one of the things that we wanted to make sure that we get into is the incel community is often criticized for misogyny. And I think even just from this episode so far, some of the things we've gone over, people might be able to see why. But to give more of an idea of the kinds of things that people are talking about, I'm going to read a quote from the article on femoids, which is from incels.wiki. Femoids is like an incel term for women. Femoids or foids. They just generally call females femoids or foids.
Yeah.
So anyway, this is the beginning of the incel page, wiki page on femoids. Femoids, or foids, short for female humanoid organisms, is a term for flaky creatures who have bullied or ignored you your entire life. That is, unless they were somehow making money or trying to make money off you as a teacher or counselor or hairdresser or wife, etc. It is rumored that foids are capable of close, stable friendships, but most women also dispute this. Popular femoid hobbies include twerking as well as feminism, the process by which women seize the means of reproduction to liberate themselves from ugly beta provider men, all under the pretense that their sexual freedom will trickle down below sub-8 decile rated males. So I was wondering, do you agree with the characterization of the incel community as misogynist, or what are your opinions of the incel community and its views and kind of treatment of women, or how do you see this?
I mean, the definition that you read out of femoids or foids or like female humanoids, I mean, I guess I kind of agree with it. I mean, I would say I mostly agree with it. I mean, I just don't agree with the portion where it says it's rumored that foids are capable of close, stable friendships, but most women also dispute this. I mean, women are capable of forming stable friendships. I mean, women actually do this pretty well. I mean, women form friendships amongst themselves way better than men do. Men are far more disagreeable than women. Women stand in solidarity far more than men do. Men fight amongst themselves. Men kill each other. Women don't do that. So this is the part I disagree with. But I do agree with in terms of like popular hobbies like twerking, feminism, stuff like that. I mean, I understand what they're trying to get at. I kind of do agree. I mean, the idea of liberating themselves from the clutches of low-tier men. I mean, I agree with this. So it's not. I mean, I don't disagree with this actually.
Do you feel like that? Do you feel like you see hate or a lot of hate or disdain for women in the incel community?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna lie. I mean, we do hate women. That's just the way it is. I mean, we have been shunned by women. We have been constantly rejected by women. We're ignored, or we are given stares of contempt. We are discriminated against on a regular basis. So it's very difficult for us to have like a. I mean, I know we are not entitled to all these things. We are not entitled to acceptance. We're not entitled to being friends with women or having relationships with women. But just on a human scale, right? Just receiving so much rejection on a daily basis, it makes incels resentful. It makes people resentful. People in our community resentful, and so we do, hate women for sure. I mean, just not gonna lie about it and call a spade a spade.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Your honesty about it.
Do you hate all women?
Well, I would say we hate majority of the women, large majority. I mean, maybe like one or two we don't hate.
Okay, so it's a bit of like a tit for tat kind of thing, like you guys reject us sexually, and so we hate you, sort of.
I mean, the hate just comes naturally. I mean, it's not exactly in the tit for tat framework of things. It's just I mean, I don't know. I mean, I don't know how to answer this because, I mean, we're not specifically hating them to get them to feel our repercussions. We're just okay. Maybe we are, but I mean, the hate just comes naturally. I mean, it wasn't planned. I mean, the hate wasn't planned because like wasn't meant to make them feel a certain thing. maybe there's revenge planned, or maybe there is stuff that incels sometimes do, like, ghosting women out by chat fishing or stuff like that. That's planned out of revenge for sure. And that's like, that can be a tit for tat kind of thing. But like, just the hate itself, it just comes naturally.
Sorry, what's Chad fishing?
Chat fishing is just catfishing with like some fake chat pictures. And so sometimes a woman might get excited to meet up with this good-looking guy, but turns out, there's no one to meet up with because, the guy behind the chat fishing experiment never planned to show up in the first place. So the woman feels ghosted, the woman can feel confused, and woman can feel disheartened by the experience. So that's how we kind of like get back at women for rejecting us.
Okay, it's like creating a fake Tinder profile with a...
Yeah, so that's like a tit
picture.
that's like a tit for tat mentality. But the hate itself, I'm not sure. Hate just comes naturally because, it's just organic. It's not like planned. There's no goal like, I'm going to hate you, I'm going to hurt you. It's just organic. It's just natural. Because, how can you like someone who, en masse how can you like a group en masse when they reject you outright, right? On a daily basis. So.
Okay. You guys feel good about stopping there?
Sure.
Yeah, so this is like sort of as part of the episode where you sort of shut down, right, Katie?
Yeah. Yeah. Basically, this was the part of the episode where afterwards I was in kind of a brain fog and didn't know how to engage anymore because I just listened to somebody spend a significant period of time essentially, saying that they hate me after we had been having, up until this point, what seemed like a pretty respectful conversation. Like, it was a dark ideology that I did not agree with, but I felt like the conversation was going pretty well. And then it became clear that there were much darker feelings being harbored than I realized. And I just, I shut down. You're right. Even just re-listening to that clip, I'm kind of shutting down again.
Yeah, interesting. I wanted to, just curious if that was happening or not. I guess for me, it's unsurprising that he hates women. Like, I kind of, like, we talked about some studies leading up to this episode about how even husbands have, like, very low empathy towards their wives. And I just kind of go through life assuming that a very large proportion of men hate women.
Really?
Or have very little empathy for women, like vanishingly little. Yeah. I actually think it's super common.
We talked about this before. Like, I think men on average have less empathy than women. Although I would say that the way it works for me is I have a lot of empathy for a few people that are close to me. But I think in general, women are sort of more empathetic. I think there's data to back this up. So to you, I guess it would make sense that men just in general seem to have a low level of empathy.
I think a lot of men also have an bitterness and hatred towards women that remains unexpressed.
I think probably a lot of men are getting less sex than they would like to. Probably most men. I would guess that causes bitterness and resentment just in general. But maybe they take it out on women because women are, I don't know, more vulnerable or something.
This is another thing that shut me down during this conversation a lot, is it felt like there was this kind of background assumption that we never really dug into, which is, okay, just because you're not getting what you want from a certain group of people doesn't mean it justifies hate. Like, it seems like we spent most of the conversation from this point on, and even before this a bit, it was kind of addressing this idea of, are you really an incel, or can incels really get sex someday, rather than diving into this kind of, like, the ideology behind this, which is that if I can't get sex, then I should hate women and hate the world.
I mean, I think a lot of it is an adaptation. Like, I think the violence, I mean, this is kind of dark, but, you know, violence is an economic strategy, like, and it is because it works a lot of times. If you can threaten violence, if you don't get your way, then a lot of times people will allow you to get your way. So I think that's part of it.
Chris, you seem to be arguing that if a man truly was so unattractive that he didn't have a chance of scoring with women, it would be justified for him to hate women and to live in this state of extreme resentment.
I wouldn't say it would be justified, but I would say it would be understandable.
Would you hate women if you could never get laid?
I don't know. I might.
So what makes you different from an incel?
That I don't buy into the Blackpill ideology. I think it's wrong.
Okay. I mean, Katie, you were bringing out some pretty good arguments comparing inceldom to people with disabilities the other day and this attitude.
Yeah, one of the issues that a lot of people with physical disabilities or mental disabilities often deal with is it's very hard to find romantic or sexual partners. And like for many people, they don't find romantic or sexual partners depending on their disability. And at least from, I don't have a ton of experience or knowledge in this community, but like from what I've seen and from what I've heard from it in general, like people who are speaking about this issue coming from a disability community, they don't tend to become hateful and resentful. It's more of a positive attitude towards appreciation of life and realizing that just because you have some sort of disadvantage doesn't mean that you can't live an extremely fulfilling life.
I mean, I just disagree with that. Do you have data on that?
I don't.
Do you disagree that most disabled people aren't bitter and hateful?
I've heard of plenty of disabled people who have killed themselves because they became hopeless.
Of course, many do, and no, I don't have data here, but like disabled people in general as a group don't hate able-bodied people and would not try to justify that.
I mean, that's a different situation.
Well, it suggests that
it's
not
analogous.
Yeah, it's analogous. It suggests that not being able to get laid or being disadvantaged genetically or circumstantially relative to other groups doesn't inevitably entail a reaction of hatred and resentment.
Yeah, I mean, when do you have something to say?
Well, I guess I was just wondering if, like, what that means exactly. Like, I have an idea of what hate means, but do you personally feel, if you're willing to go into that, and do you think that a large percent of incels feel like a palatable, just like disdain for women that they meet throughout their day-to-day life? Like,
yeah, I think, I mean, most incels like aren't fond of women for sure. Like, we don't like their behavior in general. We don't like the way women look at things and their perspectives and just all that. Yeah.
Okay, so in this genetic determinism framework, there's an idea that women are a certain way and that it's not really changeable.
Yeah,
and you guys just you hate it.
I mean, yeah, I mean, we hate our genetic condition. I mean, the stuff we inherited. I mean, out of no doing of our own, we just inherited it, and we have no way to change it, and we have to live with it. And so, yeah, we do hate it.
So, if I could ask, just in this conversation, are you treating me differently from how you would treat Ariel and Katie?
Not right now. In terms of just questions, no. I mean, no. I'm just answering whatever questions I'm being given.
Okay.
Okay, but like emotionally, are you reacting to us differently?
I don't think so. But this is just my subjective experience. I don't know how like another incel would do it. I mean, I'm just me. Like, I'm not the perfect representative of this community. Sure, I am a representative. but I don't I don't think I can embody.
Well, I mean, the reason why I ask is just because you implied that you hate women, and so I'm just trying to figure out what that means.
Well, I don't hate women for like walking down the street. I don't hate women if they go to the bathroom. I don't hate women if they sit and like work on their computer. I hate when they demonstrate hateful behavior that's worthy of my resentment. Right? If they act out unjustly towards me, if they discriminate against me, if they don't, if I'm asking them a question and if they don't answer it. I mean, like say if it's a woman receptionist and she doesn't like the way I look or something like that, or maybe and she's just not warm to my questions, and even though it's her job, and like it's just unjust behavior. And if you demonstrate that, then I have a reason to hate you. If you're shouting at me, I mean, if I've done nothing wrong to you. If you're trying to trick me into something, then I have a reason to hate you.
Okay, so in general, you're fine with women as long as they treat you fairly.
I mean, yeah, I suppose yes.
Do you feel like you get a lot of that though? Like you're mentioning situations with receptionists and stuff like that. Like what kind of?
Yeah, I mean, I've gotten it one or two times, but in general, I would say no. I mean, yeah, but I mean, it's just that I mean. The kind of behavior that I see online from women and some of the things that they say, that's what's infuriating to me.
Okay, and you believe in this worldview where those aren't just like a few exceptions, but that's just ultimately how all women are deep down, kinda.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of evidence which is indicative that this is just not like these are not isolated cases. These are not exceptions to the rule, and that it is just the rule.
What is the rule? Like, if you had to give a few specifics of like some of these rules.
I mean, the rule is that that women behave a certain way, like they are primitive, and their sexual selection is very primitive. There's no way to get around it. They are they're very discriminatory. They're very selective, and even though they don't apply the same pressures on themselves, the same selection pressures on themselves. Because I mean, they are also their genetics are also passing on, right? If women are mostly selective because they want their children to be stronger, healthier, more competitive, more fit, essentially, more fit for life, they should take their own genetics into consideration as well. Like they should put themselves under the same harsh rules, right? And I'm not sure they do that because a lot of the times I'll see like a very short woman who's like 4'11" or something with a 6-foot guy. So I mean, I'm sure the woman said yes because I mean, woman might have a child with this person who's very tall. But I mean, did she even think of the possibility that if she were to have a son, her son could be very short? Because if 6 feet is like almost the average now, if the average is like 5'10" now, by the time her son grows up, her son might very well be having a very hard time in the dating market, or maybe in the job market as well, because we have seen that taller people are paid more, taller people are like they have a better social standing, they're more accepted. So it's not just dating. So I mean, did she even consider that for a second? And I'm sure she didn't, because she.
So in a nutshell, if I understand, the idea is women go for chads according to this worldview. Women are going for chads, and the real deep down reason they're doing that is to maximize genetics. And there's like an unfairness about it because women aren't subjected to the same pressures in the dating world because they supposedly have it easier in dating.
It's also an unfairness because, I mean, we don't need chad looks today in the contemporary world, right? I mean, in the modern world, there's no value of a man being very tall, right? In fact, I mean, if you're tall, you need more calories, and you can. If you're really tall, you can develop heart problems, and there's a tendency. And you have a higher risk of cancer. Slightly, I mean, it's not a lot, but I mean, yeah, I mean, from our evolutionary past, I mean, our primitive mentality, being tall is very good, but I mean, it's kind of dysgenic to select for height because, I mean, height doesn't have a lot of relevance in the modern world.
Well,
okay, guys, it's 12:30, and I'm a little bit worried because we still have 2 more interview questions, so I kind of just want to ask the questions unless there's really burning clarification follow-up questions, Chris and Katie. I kind of just want to get through these questions and get to the discussion. Does that sound okay?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So, so the incel community has hit the... Okay, sorry, I have to get back in the... Okay, so this is kind of a good segue into our next question, which is the fact that the incel community has hit the news mainly when in the past, some self-described incels have gone on to commit mass murderers. So do these tragedies tell us something about the incel mindset? And like, what do you make of them?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that, people are pushed. I mean, a lot of men just feel isolated, right? And a lot of that isolation just builds up inside them, and all the mental stress just builds up inside them. And sometimes there's just like very few instances we have had just an eruption of the distress in just such a violent manner, where they've gone out and killed a lot of people. These are just very few rare instances. Most of us don't do this. Most of us in the incel community just we just stay in our room for most of the time. We have trouble going out. We can barely go out. We can barely talk to another person. We're pretty high our inhibitions are very high. We have trouble interacting in the real world. So doing something like this is pretty challenging for most of us, I would say. But there are one or two of us who just can't take it, and all of that inhibition is just overcome with this burst of anger, and they just react badly.
Is it condoned or partially condoned in the incel community on forums?
I mean, yeah, I see them being celebrated for sure. I mean, I've noticed it. But I mean, personally, I don't condone it. I don't think violence solves anything. I think violence makes it worse for incels because it's just going to make them more of a persecuted community than they already are. And the more violent acts are committed, the more there's a chance of intelligence agencies coming after them, going to their homes, and persecuting them and throwing them in prison. We are already seeing a lot of civil rights being taken away, effectively being taken away, free speech laws. They're just not being upheld as well. Our rights are being lost. A lot of us are taking away our own rights because we don't want to exercise them, and we're just becoming more authoritarian and totalitarian overall. So under in this scenario, there's a good chance that incels could be just thrown in prison, and just for saying something, just for writing something that's considered like a threat. I think there's a law in the UK, if you say something racist, you can be arrested or something. And they're probably going to throw him in jail because now given the mass shootings that have occurred, or maybe potentially that can occur, they're just going to be in a more heightened state of security. They're going to have this sense of paranoia with the intention of avoiding any further deaths. So they're just going to act against incels without any kind of heeding of their civil rights. So that's my fear. The way they glorify violence, it's a bit childish to me. I can understand that they're very very much rejected, and they feel very angry. But so they just give up all their rationality and let it all be substituted by their emotions and their anger and their frustration. That's what I feel.
I watched the interrogation, and he did seem to have some kind of ideology around a beta uprising and
yeah.
a revolutionary kind of framework.
Yeah.
Do you know anything about that?
It's just the beta uprising is it's just a revolt from low tier men who have not been able to secure relationships. That's what I understand from it.
Okay, so some of these guys are trying to start a violent.
Well, they're just trying to start something. Maybe not a violent one. Maybe just a protest. Maybe something like that. Maybe just publicly voicing their opinions. It's maybe not even a full-scale protest. Maybe not violence at all.
Okay, so that was a really interesting interview. Thank you for doing that, John. Now we are going to have a portion of open discussion. So I think in listening to that and hearing the perspective in a bit more detail and some background research the three of us have done, we have some questions, comments, points of disagreement, issues we'd like to discuss. So now we're going to sort of just let loose and have a bit more of a free-flowing conversation around some of these ideas.
Right. Yeah, go for it.
Okay. Well, for me, I just want to say a lot of these ideas to me seem like taking some perhaps slivers of truth about the world, or like harsh truths that people don't want to acknowledge. Like, it is definitely true that tall men have advantages in dating and also professionally and tend to be treated better and things like that. But it's like taking some things that are true and blowing it up to, in my view, an extremely negative and defeatist mindset. Like when I read through incels.co, it seems like everybody's worldview just has this giant black cloud over it and isn't able to see anything positive or anything that could be changed. A defeatist, kind of like you said, like an incel or a true cell is someone for whom there is no hope. And I think that's the biggest thing that I take issue with in this whole ideology. It seems like it seems kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy to me.
Yeah, I guess so. But I wouldn't call it self-fulfilling because there are people who have tried to change their circumstances and failed. So a lot of incels have actually tried to approach women. They've tried to talk to women. They've tried to socialize. They've tried to build a community, and they've failed because they're just not accepted, and they're just socially called because their looks are not optimal. And they've only been able to get friends who are just like on their level. They've not been able to transcend their level and get to a better place.
Like their level of attractiveness, basically.
Transcend. So if they have a certain community, right, of people who are just like them, and they need to get to a level where they can attract women, they've not been able to do it, or they maybe reaching out to a community where there are women whom they can build something with, and they've not been able to do it. So I wouldn't say it's entirely self-fulfilling because they have tried. And they have come to this conclusion after a lot of hard knocks. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, my take on the situation is just, I kind of alluded to it earlier. It seems like the red pill ideology is the black pill ideology, or is the black pill viewpoint, except with a growth mindset rather than a fixed mindset. And actually, Ariel shared this mindsets book as part of the reading for this, which shows, there are studies that if you have the growth mindset, then you'll end up actually being able to change your situation. Whereas if you have the fixed mindset, you'll end up kind of spiraling downwards because you think that, you're limited permanently by these things that, maybe are serious limitations, but if you see them that way, then they actually become permanent limitations. Whereas if you see them as something temporary that can be overcome, then lots of people end up overcoming those limitations.
Just to explain those concepts, so Chris was referring to the mindsets theory by Carol Dweck, which is this idea that there's two mindsets you can have about any of your traits, like intelligence, appearance, creative skill. You can either believe that it's an inborn genetic trait that can't be changed, or you believe it's a learned skill that can be improved.
Yeah.
And so people, they've done studies, like on when they prime kids to have one mindset or the other, and you can do that either by complementing their ability or complementing their effort. When you complement their ability, they become less inclined to take risks. They try to just do the problems and the tasks that they already know how to do that are easier. They're more discouraged when they fail. They're more competitive with others. They tend to resent other people's success more. And their behavior is oriented around proving that they're one of the talented ones instead of around improving their skill. Whereas when kids have the growth mindset, they challenge themselves. They're more cooperative. They take failures as lessons instead of as some kind of tally on an unchangeable ledger. So that's just what Chris is referring to. So you have the fixed. So the mindset theory isn't actually making any claims about whether intelligence or attractiveness or whatever is actually inborn or environmental. It's just making claims about whether you believe it is one or the other alters your approach.
And your rate of success.
So I was just saying that my life is actually, like, the way it's panned out, it's actually a good way to disprove this mindset theory that you just mentioned right now, because so there was a time when I actually believed, maybe 10 years ago, I actually believed that I could overcome whatever academic drawbacks I had, because I wanted to believe that I could become more intelligent with effort, with skill, as I develop my skill with effort and with time and energy and all that. But I mean, at the end of the day, after many years of labor, I realized that there's a certain barrier that you cannot cross, and that's determined by your genetics entirely. Because I actually tried that in the sense that when I went to university, I saw how I would put a lot of effort into my learning and my studies and all the assignments that were given to me. And then I saw other people, my peers who were around me. I mean, sure, they had a tough time, but in the end, they were able to do a lot of the other things, like extracurricular activities that I was never able to do, because they were somehow able to just learn stuff faster or get over things, get things done quicker, and then they were able to still write all the exams and tests, and the grades that they got were comparable to mine or even better, in spite of them having devoted a chunk of their time to extracurriculars. And that's how I realized that it has to be genetic. So that just tells me that there's a certain barrier that you cannot cross in spite of your efforts.
I mean, so did you ever think, like, instead of I have this genetic barrier to doing well in this school, like maybe I'm just in the wrong subject, maybe I'm just studying the wrong thing. Maybe studying isn't the thing I should be going for. Maybe I'm good at something else in proportion to the amount that I'm bad at this one thing.
Not at that point. Not when I was in school. I didn't realize that. I mean, I only realized that after I got out of school, after I got my degree. That's when I realized that, I wasn't good enough for that major.
So what was your degree in? Sorry?
I was in engineering. But, at that time, I didn't... it was in electrical engineering. But at that time, I didn't really realize that, that major wasn't right for me. I thought I could hack it, given my effort level. But the thing is that, effort can only get you so far if you don't have IQ. Like, raw computational power, where the brain just connects concepts quickly, is able to get stuff quickly, is able to imagine better, has better spatial reasoning. Those are the kinds of things that you just cannot, you just cannot substitute with hard work, or hard work or belief, like in this case.
So just to clarify, so you got a degree in electrical engineering, and you think you have some genetic barrier to intelligence?
At that time, I didn't think there was any genetic barrier, because for a long time, I believed that hard work could actually work. I believed that I could.
But it sounds like it did, is what I'm saying. It sounds like you got the degree, right?
Yeah, when I got the degree, but it's still not good enough to hack it in the industry, because industry is pretty difficult compared to what you learn in school. What you learn in school could be 2 + 2, but industry, like when you're working in industry, it's a lot different, because you actually have to deal with a live application that has a lot of money behind it. So you can't so you cannot make mistakes. One, and it's a lot more sophisticated. Because it's actually delivering a product to a customer, right?
Have you tried to hack it in industry?
I tried. It's not. I wasn't good enough. So yeah.
I bring this up because I had the exact same experience that you did. I also got a degree in electrical engineering, and then when I went to go try to get a job, I was unable to do that, and it was frustrating. And so what I ended up doing is I ended up going into software instead of hardware, which there are a lot more jobs in software. I bet with an electrical engineering degree, you'd have a really good shot at a software job. Did you end up getting some kind of job after?
I did. I worked in web development for a bit. Then I decided to quit because the thing is that web development landscape is just changing constantly. Every day you have to learn something new. I was thinking okay, I just can't keep on learning like this. I need something more comfortable. So I was like, fuck it.
So did you enjoy programming, even though it was like if you'd been able to stick with just learning I don't know, like Angular or something like that, and it just it wasn't changing every 2 years and you could just stick with one skill. Did you enjoy programming, and were you improving as you worked?
I mean, I enjoyed it, but I mean, I didn't like the fact that there was so much to learn constantly. So I was like, I don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to completely dismiss what you're saying. Like, every indication that I have from what I've looked to, it does show that intelligence is about 50% heritable. So I think we should at least acknowledge that, like, some people have a much easier time than others. It's not.
It's about 40 to 80% heritable. They don't know enough to say.
No, I mean, but
how genetic heritable it is.
Sorry. What I'm just trying to say is that, I mean, like, your belief system is not strong enough such that it can change your underlying physical attributes. I mean, that's what I think. I mean, you can believe whatever you want. I mean, this is what a lot of psychologists say. Like, if you believe a certain thing, or maybe if you, like, cope in a certain way, then it'll, like, your circumstances will get better. But I mean, the only thing that gets better is, like, your perception. Like, I mean, it doesn't get better. I mean, what it does, it just puts a rose-colored pair of rose-colored glasses over your eyes. That's what it does. Like,
I think there's an alternative. Like, you could either, take the black pill like you have, and develop a mindset of, this is what my genes are, I'm stuck.
Yeah.
Or you could, like you said, you could adopt some kind of highly optimistic belief system of, I can work hard and, I can make it.
Yeah.
Or there could be some kind of alternative of,
I mean,
recognizing a certain amount of limitations, but still aiming to go as far as you can go and be the best that you can be. And, like, my honest belief is that most people, including most people who have all the advantages in the world, are not maximizing their potential. And in a quote unquote competitive landscape, most people, if they truly were maximizing their potential, I think could do pretty well against people who maybe have a lot more genetic advantages than them.
I mean, the thing is that some people who are genetically privileged, I just feel, I mean, if they start reaping the rewards early, like, say they're good looking and they start reaping the rewards early, they may not work out, right? They may not have to work out because they may not feel the need to be in the gym, like the red pill guy who is, like, constantly on the hamster wheel of self-improvement. They're just running and running and running. It's a never-ending treadmill because they think that self-improvement can actually get them to a better place, but they're just always on it, and they're never reaching that end goal. And then there's the other end of the spectrum where the genetically privileged person just never even steps on the treadmill or the hamster wheel because, I mean, he or she is already reaping the rewards by being who he or she is. And so there's a difference between being and doing. So and being, what I feel, is superior to doing, because, I mean, being enables you to have a certain amount of self-improvement, but not be a slave to self-improvement, Sure, I'm going to push, I don't know my limits, and I'm going to keep on pushing till I get somewhere. But, I mean, you're still pushing all the time, right? I mean, there's still this need, right? And this unrequited need that's in your mind. And your subconscious has already kind of revealed the truth to you, because if you're constantly having to self-improve, or you constantly have to push to get to a new level or something like that, and have to explore uncharted territory of your limits, then you're in order to get some end result, right, which you haven't been able to get till now, then your subconscious mind has already revealed to you the truth that you're not good enough in the first place, because that's why you have to keep on improving, right? And whereas with the guy who already has all that, and yeah, you still have to work hard, obviously, but I mean, it's just better. Things are just going to flow much easier for him, right? Easier for that person. It's just going to come to that person more naturally, and he or she's not going to have to force things to make them happen. That's the difference.
Well, this is something that Dweck talks about in the book, is that in our society there's almost like a dichotomy, like in the turtle and the tortoise and the hare story, where the hare is the more skilled one, but the tortoise works harder, so he wins. There's almost like a dichotomy between the talented who don't have to work hard and the unskilled who have to slave away.
Yeah.
But I mean, in reality, there's 4 quadrants, right? There's like the talented who work hard, the talented who don't work hard, the less talented who work hard, and the less talented who don't work hard.
Yeah.
And I mean, the nice thing about doing instead of being is you have some amount of control over doing, whereas being, you can't influence that. You can't influence.
Yeah, I mean, but if you've already been privileged at being, then you don't need to influence it, right?
Well, here's the thing about the mindsets too. If you have the people in the growth mindset who are involved in that world of doing, they start to enjoy it. They start to enjoy learning every day, and they start to enjoy doing a lot of things. It's not like you're just dragging yourself along.
No, but then there's also those people who just keep on doing, and they can't get the result that they want. A lot of the red pill guys, like even if they attain a relationship, their relationship breaks down because they can't be like act like that alpha person all the time, right? And so for some reason it just doesn't pan out because they have to be at that high energy level all the time. That high level that they have set themselves, but that's not where they are naturally. So, I mean, inevitably, when they come back to their default state, maybe their relationship doesn't work out as well, and so back to self-improvement again. So, and that's a race that continues, right? So, I mean, being like if you're in a good place as a privileged person, there's nothing like it. I mean, that's what I'm trying to say. But if you're not, I mean, then you can improve yourself to the next level, but probably not much beyond that, because there's a certain barrier that you just won't be able to cross with effort. I don't know why you think that. I mean, it almost sounds like you're denying that hard work can lead to improvement, and so I'm sure you worked for a company when you were a web developer. There were probably more senior developers who had been there for a while, who had been working for years and were probably paid a lot more. And so what that suggests is that because they had been there, like working hard, they had been improving. And so now they're actually worth more per year. It seems like you're kind of denying that if you just sit there and work, then you can improve and become more valuable. No, I mean, I'm not denying that you can improve. What I'm trying to say is that, like, the extent of improvement is limited. That's what I'm trying to say.
Okay, to bring it back a little bit to the dating and incel question, John, what percentage would you say of dating success is determined by genetic inborn qualities, and what percentage would you say is determined by this world of doing and behavior?
Well, I mean, I think genetics determines a lot of it. I think dating is mostly just biology.
Like 100%, 90%?
I mean, I would say a lot of it's like biology. I don't know if it's 90 or 100, but I mean, it's a lot of it's biology. I mean, what else is there besides biology? And that's what I'm trying to get.
Biology as in determinism?
Yeah, I mean, biology is in genetics and determinism, yeah.
Yeah, well, so the reason I ask is because I see genetic expression as another side of biology, and that's something that you can affect.
Yeah, I mean, environment matters. I mean, that's a good point that you raise. I mean, I will acknowledge that environment is a factor. I mean, if you weren't raised properly, chances are you're not going to be very functional.
Like, let's say Chris becomes a heroin addict tomorrow and starts not bathing and just playing video games on heroin all day and living on Mars bars. Those choices will affect his success with women, right? And that's not genetic. That's choices he's making.
I mean, yeah. I mean, it will, but it also matters where he's starting off in the first place, right? I mean, so if Chad is say for example on a high level in the dating marketplace, right? And then if Chad, starts doing heroin, and maybe initially it won't matter that much because he'll still be able to attract women on account of his looks. Maybe they won't stay with him. I mean, once they discover that he has a addiction problem, but at least he'll be able to cross that initial barrier and get into intimate liaison with multiple women.
So you can definitely negatively affect your sexual market value, right?
I mean, if you do drugs, I mean, you can impact your market value, but I mean, what I'm trying to say is that market value. Where did you start off in your market value to begin with? Go down.
Well, but how do you know whether you're genetically a low SMV male or if you're just fucking up a lot of stuff? How can you tell the difference?
Well, that's determined by your biology, right? I mean, if you
right, but how can you know? You know, how can you know that you're not just doing everything wrong and you just don't even realize?
No, I mean, you can know, I mean, in your bones. I mean, how big your bones are, how good you look. I mean, these are objectively measurable. These can tell you.
Sure.
Yeah.
But you can also affect your bone density, and you can also affect how good you look. I mean, men who are overweight, who don't work out,
I understand what you mean.
Are not going to have a lot of success in the dating market. Whereas if they, a lot of men, I've seen transformations. I've seen them like start working out, start losing weight, you know, maybe get LASIK eye surgery or something like that. You know, maybe I don't know, start being more stylish or something like that. I mean, it seems like you can. It seems like you can either completely ruin your dating chances, or you can really, really make them good.
Look, I mean, there's this spectrum in which you can move, right? I mean, say your SMV value is like 6 out of 10, then maybe you can shift it around, maybe to 7 or maybe to 5 if you do something wrong, maybe to 7 if you do something right. But I mean.
It seems like you could shift it all the way to 0 if you really try.
I mean, if you can break your legs. I mean, you can get into an accident. You can throw some acid on your face and just disfigure yourself.
Right.
So that will make you like a 0 out of 10.
Right. So my question is, if you're sitting at 0 or 1 out of 10, how do you know whether you didn't just do that to yourself? Whether you didn't do something that was entirely in your control that just ruined you, and maybe there's something you can do to reverse whatever you did.
Well. That's a good question, actually. I have to think about this. So, I don't have an answer, like an immediate answer. So
the reason why I asked this question, about like, how do you know whether you're not just fucking up a lot of stuff, is because I have personal firsthand experience with, I actually was fucking up a lot of stuff. For instance, I had really bad asthma. Right. Which caused me to be very unathletic for most of my life. And, you know, I couldn't play sports because I would just have trouble breathing. And then, I was hospitalized once when I was 11, once when I was 16. And then when I was 25, I tried switching up my diet, and I got rid of grains out of my diet. And after that, I didn't have asthma anymore. So I became much more athletic. And then actually I realized that changing up my diet had like drastic effects on my physical and mental well-being.
Sure.
On my outlook, like literally changing my diet made me less depressed. I was just like, oh,
okay,
everything seems rosier now. Like, I don't even know why. I just feel better, you know? And so once I had that kind of that insight, it made me realize all the other things that I was also fucking up about my life. And I think a lot of people are probably like I used to be.
I mean, like, the argument that you and I are having right now is primarily between how much agency we have, right? How much agency each of us possess when it comes to, like, the amount of improvement that can be done. So that's going to differ from person to person. Some people, like, maybe they have a good base to begin with. So maybe, like, if they do the right improvements, they can jump a lot in value. And maybe some people are innately fucked by given the phenotype they have, and those guys, even if they get 3 or 4 surgeries, they're not gonna make it. Even if all of them just optimize their genetics and all of them optimize their environment for the right expression and all that, they're just not gonna end up on the same level. So, for example, a person who grew up to be 5'5" is not gonna be on the same level as someone who grew up to be 6'5". That's just like
right. But somebody whose sexual market value is like but somebody whose sexual market value is like a 1 out of 10 or a 2 out of 10 or something like that, because they're extremely unhealthy, could potentially bump their sexual market value up, you know, even above average. If they just totally maxed out all of their
Sure. I mean, if they max themselves up to like a 6 out of 10, and that would be very good. But what about someone? But will they actually be able to make a difference? Because women like are only like moved in terms of their sexual attraction only when they see like a really good looking man. Because the way women rate men is like, unless they're like an 8 out of 10, women don't really get sexually stimulated in this sense.
But
so,
what
in the sense
like
that
what is the goal here? Like when we look around at society, it's not like only the top 10, 15% of men are leading normal lives with spouses. The majority of men, even average-looking men.
So, I mean, what they found is that 40% of men reproduce, whereas 80% of women reproduce. So that's a thing.
That's not true.
That's not true
That's
right
not
now.
Maybe
They actually
that's
found
true
this.
historically.
40%. There's actually some proof of this, actually. Let me just look it up.
Historically, twice as many women as men have reproduced.
Yes, twice as many women as men have reproduced. Yes, that's what I'm saying.
That isn't true in the current context.
So,
What are the current numbers?
It's probably worse now because
It basically means the average male who successfully reproduces has two partners.
I found a study.
I found another that.
Do you want to read yours first?
Well, I thought it was a pretty good one. According to the U.S. Census, only 25% of American men between 50 and 60 are childless.
Yeah, but the incels are going to say that that's because that was back in the days when people were more monogamous.
Yeah, is that what you think, John? You think that basically a generation ago everything was much easier?
I think everything was significantly easier, but I mean, since the sexual revolution, I mean, things have started to get harder for a lot of men. So, yeah.
I mean, for instance, like your parents clearly, had you. So, I mean, clearly they were successful.
I mean,
so what changed between them and you?
I mean, because I'm from a Middle Eastern country, right? I mean, they were arranged to marry each other. So, I mean, they didn't have much choice. I mean, but if they did have choice, I mean, I guess, I mean, maybe my parents wouldn't have ended up together because, I mean, they're not very, they're not people who, who would be sexually successful, in my opinion. So they're not very good looking and they're not, good enough genetically. I mean, that's what I think, to attract. But it's...
both of them?
Yeah, in both of them. I mean, if it's...
couldn't they attract each other?
I mean, they didn't attract each other. I mean, they just kind of accepted each other and kind of just went ahead with it because that's what society told them to do, and that was that.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty rough. I mean, yeah, going from a society with arranged marriages to a society with sexual freedom is, it's going to be rough.
I mean, the thing is, so, I mean, if you go back 8,000 years, right? I mean, we talked about this on our chat that for every one man, 17 women reproduce. So that just tells you a lot about the sexual inequality. So,
I'm not sure what you're trying to prove by that statistic.
Oh.
Well, yeah. Can you just explain what the implications of that are?
The implication is that harems form, right? I mean, women form harems around very top tier men, leaving most other men celibate.
And this is a natural consequence of.
This is a natural consequence.
This was after the agricultural revolution.
Yeah, this is after the agricultural revolution. So I find it a little strange that you're sort of implying that this is like a woman's choice kind of thing. Like it seems more likely to me that the woman's choice. It seems more likely to me that women's choice was more dominant in the tribal era when the ratio was 2-1.
Yeah, I would say we're mostly genetically still hunter-gatherers, and if we want to look at what's going to be the best for our genes, we should look at what hunter-gatherers did. And it sounds like the ratio was more like 2-1.
Or what's typical for our genes, because just because something's natural doesn't necessarily mean it's best.
Sure. But we were under much, much heavier selection pressures, I would say, during the hunter-gatherer times. So what happened probably needed to be a lot closer to what was ideal. Yeah, I mean, it definitely makes sense that women should be more selective than men, because women have to carry the child and then they have to care for it and raise it, whereas the man, it's kind of been kind of hit or miss with whether the man is going to stay and actually take care of the child or just go reproduce with some other woman.
Right. So my original point is that women don't find most men attractive, and they only find the top, I would say 20% of men attractive. Like nowadays, when if you've seen the statistics on Tinder, women are hyper selective about their selection, about who they like and who they don't. So what this means is that being a 6 out of 10 might not be enough to attract a quality mate that you are attracted to. Maybe you can get like a poor quality mate who is fat, or maybe doesn't work or something like that, or maybe has an illness. I don't know. So to get someone who's satisfactorily around your looks level, that person, like, to get that person, you would probably have to be like 8 or 9 out of 10. And
okay.
so
I feel like we have to address this issue of like this idea that women only care about looks, because it's come up a bunch of times. Katie, do you want to?
I think women
we've
care
kind of
about...
addressed the issue of like, you know, you can change your looks and whether or not you can change your looks and health a bit. But yeah, Katie.
I was just going to say, I don't think women only care about looks or even care about looks in the majority. Like, if we're looking at statistics, yes, we'll find that taller men are considered more attractive. Yes, we'll find that more masculine facial features are considered more attractive. Though actually, if you look at the studies on that, it seems to be that women find more masculine facial features more attractive for one-night stands and for flings. But when they're looking for an actual partner, that doesn't play so much of a role.
Actually, that's changed now because women are on contraceptives, which makes them like feel like they're like pregnant all the time. So they're ovulating all the time. So what that makes it is like they're now attracted to chats for long-term relationships. There's actually a video on this.
It's the opposite. It's the opposite. Like contraceptive, like a female, what do they call it? Birth control.
The pill.
It raises your progesterone, not your estrogen. So it actually is the opposite. It makes you feel like you're...
It simulates pregnancy.
It makes you feel like you're post-ovulatory almost always.
Yeah, I mean,
so it actually benefits the less ultra masculine men.
I mean,
it makes women feel like they're never ovulating, which is weird. But
I mean, no, it actually makes them more attracted to masculine men, I think.
It does not. That is not right.
I actually saw a video on this, and I can link the video to you. And this woman actually covered it pretty well, and which makes most women do the opposite when they're on the pill. They make the less masculine men, or the soy boys in this case, good for one night stands, and when they're actually looking for a long-term partner, they want someone who is like a Chad, like a hyper masculine type of man.
That's not how it works.
Yeah, I'd be surprised if the pill.
I've looked into this specific question. It's not how it works. I mean, the issue with the pill that happens a lot of the time.
Yeah, we need to make sure we include a fact check.
Yeah,
I mean, I've researched this, so I'm going to say what I believe it is based on my research, and I guess we can cut it out if I'm completely wrong. But
okay.
The way it works.
No, I mean we can link it.
We'll
link sources at the bottom.
Okay, but let me finish what I'm going to say though, because I'm going to explain it because I actually know how this works. The way it works is it makes it so that what the pill does, it prevents you from ovulating. So it makes it so that you never get that like hyperestrogen spikes that is associated in a lot of studies with women being more attracted to super masculine men. So I mean, what sometimes happens when women spend their whole youth on the pill, they'll meet a guy, they'll start dating, they'll get married, they'll go off the pill, and then they'll find they're not attracted to their husbands. That's like a common side effect of the birth control pill. So I mean, if you're looking at it through this Blackpill perspective, you could say you could one way to look at it would be, you say she's innately attracted to Chads. The pill reduces her attraction to Chads and makes her more attracted to Brads or normies. And then when she goes off the pill, her natural attraction to Chad comes back and it messes up the relationship.
Yeah, that explanation strikes me as more plausible.
Yeah.
It's a common side effect of the birth control pill. It's well known. We'll link stuff about this below, and we'll link the video you're talking about too, John.
Okay.
Right, so
I was just going to say this probably sounds really blue-pilled, but I don't think that we can de-emphasize the amount that familiarity and personality compatibility has on attraction. Like, it's also been shown that people become more attracted to faces that they see more and more over time. And there is like an individual bonding aspect to coupledom as well. If we're just looking at Tinder as our model for how dating and relationships work, then it's going to seem extremely appearance-based because it's literally a platform where you swipe left and right on people's photos. But if we look at couples who actually end up together, I don't think that it's just the case that women are trying to get the absolute hottest man that they can. I think their
biology is telling them to do that, and I think they have to fight against it.
No, I have statistics.
I think the Blackpill is right about that.
The statistics show that women, like in initial attraction and the men they initially approach, do emphasize looks quite a lot, as much as men actually. The statistics also show that women become more attracted to faces they're familiar with, like Katie said. There are studies that back that up. And there's studies that show that the longer two people know each other before they start dating, the less they pair associatively by looks. So you can say couples that, like what in incel language, a way to say it would be couples that start dating as soon as they meet each other will tend to date their looks match. Whereas couples that, let's say, know each other for 10 months before they start dating or are friends for a while, there becomes very little correlation between how attractive each of them is.
Right. Looks has everything to do with the initial attraction and not much to do with the success of the relationship after that.
And the thing is that...
Or who people ultimately end up with, the way that attraction develops over time.
Right. Sorry, John, what were you saying?
Yeah, just the way we meet people, it's just like we're just meeting people randomly now, right? So it's just based on initial attraction, which is looks, as opposed to like we're just not getting to like the way the courtship is now occurring has changed. So we're not like meeting through like friends or
in a world where everybody's using Tinder.
Yeah.
You know, obviously looks are much more important because, you know, the average relationship time on Tinder is like probably like a few minutes over some text, you know?
Right. Yeah.
You know, like the initial attraction is like almost everything in a world like that.
But online dating doesn't make up it doesn't make up all the dating world, but I think it's around half now, and that's recent.
Yeah, it's increasing though.
Yeah, but here's the thing though, like I agree that with online dating, it kind of is all about looks. I don't know, not everyone might agree with that, but that still doesn't necessarily imply a black pill perspective, though. Like, if you look at, like, the pickup artists, we did an episode on pickup artistry a while ago, they all say, like, don't use online dating, don't use Tinder. Like, you gotta meet people in person. And they have a similar ideology. They'll say, like, only the Chads do well in online dating.
Yeah, but
that doesn't mean it's hopeless. It just means you're at a disadvantage. But being at a disadvantage compared to someone who's like extremely gorgeous doesn't mean it's hopeless, right?
No, but I mean, women don't like being approached by unattractive men, and so maybe they'll entertain the conversation if the guy is lucky, right? I mean, for a while, and then they'll just politely reject him, or if they feel harassed, and they'll just alert the police, which has happened quite a few times in malls. Here in Canada, what they do is that they just they feel insecure about it, and they alert the police who ban any kind of such approaches anymore.
So let me just say that maybe the guy being ugly has a part of that.
I think there's more to those stories. I'm just gonna say,
exactly.
We'll link to them in the description.
I'm sure there's some harassment which cause maybe the woman to become very insecure and just alerting the police. That way.
So what puts women off, what makes women call the police is that you're putting off a creepy vibe, right? You're putting off a vibe like, oh, I'm not good enough for this girl.
No, but I mean, if the man was,
and so she's gonna believe that.
No, I mean, if the man was attractive,
internalizing that perspective.
No, I mean, if the man was attractive, I mean, like it doesn't matter anymore because we've seen this in Tinder. And what they'll do is, like, say if you're a good-looking man on Tinder and you have like a crap bio where the man says something like, "Oh, I'm a neo-Nazi," or like, I mean, say something like that's classless, or maybe that's just that's prejudiced, or something that's very distasteful. And women will just ignore all of that bio and just go straight for the inbox and just send him all sorts of flirty messages.
Well, sure, but there's also the case of like a visually unattractive man who's totally smooth and goes and talks to a woman. Maybe she'll reject him sexually, but she's not going to call the police. You know, she's just going to be like, no, and he's going to be like, okay,
that's still a sexual
cool.
rejection. That's still a rejection at the end of the day.
Yeah, but the thing is, the more you get rejected, the more you figure out how to not get rejected.
No, I mean
you got to go out and do it.
I mean, it's not even in your hands if you don't have looks. I mean, it's not even in your hands, right? I mean, women want looks.
But
that's part of it. That's
they
part of
do,
it. That's
but
definitely not all of it.
They do, but they also want. They want somebody who is entertaining to be around, who's fun to be around, who can take care of them, who has status, like who's cool in some kind of a way.
Yeah.
And looks has a lot to do with that.
Yeah.
It gives you a huge advantage.
I mean, it looks also gives you the appropriate platform to develop your social skills on, because you get a lot of validation early on. Because you look good, and that helps you become a cool person.
It is an uphill battle.
Yeah.
It's an uphill battle if you don't have looks. However, and I know you're not going to like anecdotes and statistics aren't going to tell you, but there are individuals who are short and small framed who do extremely well with a great deal of confidence and smoothness. And this is something that it's kind of intangible. Like you can't just tell somebody be confident and approach that girl because they might do it in like an overly harsh or creepy way, or they don't know how to actually
right.
relate.
Like you can be masculine in how you appear physically, but you can also be masculine. One of the qualities of being masculine is having experience and knowing what you want and being decisive. And the only way to get that is by having experience, is by failing a lot.
I mean, but if you're not conveying masculinity in your appearance, then it doesn't really matter because then your genes won't be selected, right?
But only to a point. Again, if you are masculine in how you behave, women will be attracted to that. And trust me, I have
that's the red
experience with
pill
this.
because there are tons of red pillers who say that, and they do have a little bit of success, I'm sure.
I used to be much less masculine in how I approached women, and it was a disaster, you know. And then
Right.
after experiencing all of that failure and learning from my failures and improving myself, I gained confidence, and I felt like the interaction was going to go well, and that's actually what makes it go well.
I mean, sure, it can go well, but ultimately, at the end of the day, if they don't select you, then it's meaningless, right?
Then you try a different woman. There's lots of women.
It's just not meaningful anymore because if you keep trying 1,000 times and you just end up feeling exhausted.
Well, you have to analyze and figure out what you did wrong.
I mean,
have you tried 1,000 times?
No, I mean, I haven't tried 1,000 times because I'm not going to because I'd rather conserve my energy.
How many times have you tried?
I mean, I've tried a few times, and sure, I mean, the woman initially responds to my attempts to converse with her, and that's fine. But eventually, I mean, there's just no interest on her part to get to know me. So the conversation doesn't flow, and I just stop because it's just not going anywhere, right? I mean,
I definitely think there's something to be said for conserving your energy, but you know, when you experience a line of failures and you haven't had an insight as to why you've been having those failures, other than okay, well, there's just something genetically wrong with me. Okay,
I mean that's the
you can have a flash of insight if you keep trying and you keep analyzing. You can have a flash of insights like, oh, that's
the only insight that I've gotten at is that looks matters a lot. I mean that's the insight that I've gotten at. After all the things. I mean, I used to think that, I'm going to hack dating because dating is like marketing and dating is like this and that. I'm going to have a strategy. I'm going to have a good personality. I used to believe in a personality a lot, actually, prior to ingesting the Blackpill. I used to believe in like all these big 5 personality traits and like MBTI and stuff like that. And I would try to like get to know what kind of what type of person I am. And how that mattered, and I would try to talk to people, and I would try to talk to women, and that worked a little bit. I mean, in the sense that but there was not that kind of raw sexual interest that you can just get by being like a manly man. You know, you're not going to generate that raw sexual interest that really gets women up and going. That's just not going to happen.
Personality It makes it great.
Personality makes it great. Personality is like a good icing, but it's not the cake itself. The cake.
It can be the cake.
No. The cake is your looks and your genetics and your health.
I can say from personal experience, I've like the last long-term relationship I had was with somebody who was tall and would be considered like genuinely really physically attractive.
There we go.
The last time, but after that, which I ended up breaking up with him. And after that, the next person that I wanted to date who rejected me was short and not particularly fit, but had a kick-ass personality.
Okay.
Like,
but it still proves that you went for the good-looking guy. Like, it doesn't disprove
in one instance.
Yeah, but she just told you that she went for
I just told you that I went for
a guy that wasn't particularly good-looking, but had a kick-ass personality.
And he rejected
her.
Yeah.
I think that would show that both looks and personality factor into it.
Yeah, at least for me, and I think for many other people.
Maybe for you, but
I mean, obviously for many other people, because otherwise he wouldn't have been in such a position to reject me, right?
Fair enough, but I mean, If you take all the data that we have so far, it shows that looks really matters. And,
they do.
It matters, yes, but we're saying that there are plenty and plenty and plenty of exceptions to that general trend.
There are exceptions, but it doesn't really discount the rule. And like
it doesn't. All things being equal, looks are going to help you.
And also, like, when you say that personality matters, does it matter before looks? Or does it matter after the looks are taken into consideration? Like, I wouldn't say
either takes precedence over another. It's each person is a holistic.
It's looks first. Okay, then once the looks goals are met, then you can go for the personality goals. Like, does this guy check off these personality traits that I am after? Like, if I want ambition, if I want intelligence, stuff like that.
What I'll say is, like, looks make more of a first impression than personality, obviously, because they're immediate. We have shown like, you see looks right away.
Yeah.
But if you're in a position to be exposed to a person's personality...
but sexual attraction is not driven by personality, right? Sexual attraction is driven by looks.
I think it's okay. I think even looks and personality is a bit of a false dichotomy. Like, how it works for me is, like, I'm often attracted to people, like, right away based on looks or not looks. But people who are in my, like, orbit in some way and who I get to know over time, I can become attracted to, even if I'm not attracted to them initially based on their looks. So the way I see it, it's like, But
does that facilitate sexual attraction? Like, can you?
Yes, it does. Yes, it can be sexual attraction for sure. I've had relationships that have begun that way. Okay. I think if you're someone who's less attractive, I think a dating strategy it kind of has. Or if you're someone who's less good looking, then a dating strategy has to be based around getting to know people. It's not just your personality. It's not just having a beautiful person. It's becoming an interesting person. It's like doing a lot of things, becoming interesting. Building your social skills, getting to know, having a network of people, having a network of both strong and weak connections, like people good friends well, people you don't know that well, being involved in your community.
Having a vibe, having a real authentic personality that comes out through how you look.
And it has to be, and you have to know people. You have to know people who you see on a regular basis, not just for going to these slazy nightclubs and Tinder, because that's not going to work if you're not good. I agree that this nightclub, Tinder, online dating thing is going to be really hard if you're not good looking.
Yeah, clubs are for good looking people to find one night stands. Same with Tinder.
And what I'm saying is that for your strategy to work, Ariel, what would need to happen is that. The woman would have to accept the man into her vicinity, into her orbit, for that to happen. But often, what happens is that women don't entertain men who are not at least at a certain looks level, so they'll just ignore him or reject him, even from being friends, and so there's no opportunity to build an attraction there. So.
I was just going to say, I would suspect that's more like a correlation. Like, a lot of guys who are really unattractive, like you've said, have faced rejection their entire lives and may develop kind of a bitter attitude. Like the kind of attitude we're discussing with the incel ideology is going to come out in the way that you interact with women, even on a friendship basis. If you're experiencing resentment and hatred towards women, that's not going to help you exude a personality that women would want to be around, even as a friend.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Mm-hmm. You have to accept that person first. And sometimes that just occurs based on looks. Even as a friend.
See, it's not just
or shared mutual interest. Maybe you're just both doing the same thing at the same time, and so you get to hang out a lot.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily if you're approaching a woman in public at random, then. Yeah, she's likely to not want to. I don't usually want to interact with guys who approach me in public to talk to me because they often give off a strange vibe, and my assumption is that they're hitting on me in some way. So yeah, I would not encourage that interaction or engage with them too much. But if it's someone who's in my social network, if you're involved in your community and you know a lot of people, and it's just someone I meet through my social network, it doesn't really matter how good looking they are. It's just how interesting the conversation is or the context of whatever's going on.
Yeah, the thing about being approached in public at random is they're only approaching you based on your looks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. When there's no other pretext, then yeah, the woman has to assume that the man is going to try and hit on her.
Yeah.
Also, another thing is that people hang around other people who are at their same level in terms of looks, socioeconomic status, all, like everything together in race. People of the same type tend to come together. So, as the saying goes, birds of the same feather flock together, right? So, what we have is a scenario where women are often surrounded by men who are at least on their looks level. So if you're not on their looks level and you try to approach that woman, it won't work.
Yeah, there's no guarantee that you're going to get any particular woman, right? And there's really no guarantee that you're going to get any partner at all, necessarily. But
yeah, I mean, there's very little guarantee if you're not good looking.
if you maximize your interests and you maximize your just potential as a human being as much as possible, then you're increasing your chances. I think that's all we're saying.
To get your foot through the door, you have to look good. Otherwise, even if you do have a good personality and you have good depth, you have good hobbies and you have good career, good frame of mind, and you think well, and you're overall a good human being, you still won't be able to show that if you don't exhibit it in some way physically, which is just looks.
To get your foot in the door, you at least minimum need to.
Yeah, you need to be a 5 out of 10. You need to be a 5 out of 10. You need to be at least normie to get your foot in the door. If you're not a normie, it won't work.
You at least minimum need to practice good hygiene and take care of yourself.
Taking a shower and being hygienic is very nice, and of course it's necessary. But I mean, there are people. Just today in the incel community, I got to rate 2 people, and the thing is that one of them was okay. One of them could definitely make it, but another person, he was just so far gone that there's just no way. No amount of hygiene and no amount of looks maxing or surgery can save this man. It's just saddening. There's no for some. Look, the bitter truth is that no matter how much you try, no matter how much improvement you do, for some people there's just no hope. Okay, they're just not gonna make it, and they just have to accept that. They can cry about it and scream in the wind, and it's a case of absurdism, right? Which Camus described. In his philosophy, that you can scream it. The world is indifferent and it's a harsh place. You can scream for some people. You can scream into the wild. You can scream at people. Scream into the world as hard as you can. But there's no answer. There's not going to be an answer. So you're not going to get what you want. You're just going to have to accept that. That's the case with some people. There's just no hope.
It is the case with some people. Some people want to be writers and they don't have the talent. Some people want to be astronauts and they don't have the intelligence.
Yeah.
Some people want a gorgeous girlfriend and they don't have the looks. A lot of people are not going to get what they want.
No.
But here's the thing in life. You can't know whether you're one of those people who's hopeless. You can't know whether you're not going to get what you want unless you pursue it. And you're not God. And you can't say, this one is good looking enough to get a girlfriend. This one isn't. This one is. This one could get a Stacy. This one could get a Becky. This one can't get anything. This one's hopeless. No one has that knowledge.
No, you
and
can't
no one can
say
really
it,
know who
but
they are unless they try.
No, but you can predict it based on their appearance, because appearance goes such a long way. You can actually predict it.
But you can look at it there are several stories of entrepreneurs who kind of had a similar situation where everybody was telling them, no, you're never going to make it. No, you're never going to succeed. You're not this enough. You're not that enough. And a lot of them did it anyway. And
a lot of them failed.
And dating is that.
How many entrepreneurs fail? Most of them fail.
Yeah, and then the ones that try again are the ones that succeed.
No,
okay?
That's not always the case, because 90% of entrepreneurs fail, and venture capitalists.
No, 90% of business ventures fail. Okay, but a lot of those are the same entrepreneurs trying again. Okay, just because.
Go ahead.
Yeah. If you try 10 times and succeed 1 time, that's good enough.
No,
the best predictor of success in business is the number of times you failed.
No, exactly. Okay, so even if you succeed for 1 second, that doesn't really matter much, right? In the never-ending fleet of your time, spent in despair. If you have 1 second of success, that doesn't really mean anything.
Yes, it does. It means everything. It means now you know how to succeed because you did it.
No, but you can't sustain your success, because sustaining that success means having certain attributes which you do not have. And
so then you try again, and you sustain it a little bit longer than a few seconds.
Maybe it won't, or maybe you'll just be too exhausted.
Yes, you learn important lessons from all of the failures. Give you data, and then you can take the data and you can analyze it, and you can figure out how to try better the next time, and then you try again the next time, and then you do better, and you collect better data.
Look, for some people, there's just no trying.
Having a life of striving and failing is still more noble, and I might add more masculine than just having a life of like giving up and what did you call it?
Actually, that's true.
Lay down and rot. Like this.
That's like the least masculine thing I've ever heard.
It's a very unattractive way to live. If you talk.
I mean that is unattractive, but I mean it's just sometimes sometimes you're just gonna get to a point where you become exhausted, right? And you're just going to have to live in your shit, essentially, like live in your filth, and just accept the fact that it's not like you're going to live in stagnation. It's not going to go anywhere, and you just
it's not going to go anywhere soon. But you might have to. But if you focus on cleaning up the shit and then cleaning up your health, figuring out strategies so that you can get more energy, so that you can have more energy, so you can try again, then things start going right. Trust me,
but just
I did
because
this.
Just because you have more energy doesn't mean you're going to produce a different outcome. And just
it means that you're going to be able to try more times, and that's what you want. You want to be able to try better. You want to be able to try better every time. You want to be able to say, "Okay, I failed. Why did I fail? I'm not going to do that again this time." And then you try again.
Okay,
I don't know that it's just about like maybe we're emphasizing trying too much, because I feel like if you're speaking to somebody who has a difficult time with women and you're like, just try and try again and try again and try again, I don't think that's really the thing.
That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying try better every time. Try and then figure out what you did wrong.
I'm talking about
and
trying
then try
in
better.
life. I'm talking about trying in life, like trying professionally and with projects and stuff.
Exactly. I was going to say, I think Ariel, your strategy is better, and you don't even necessarily have to see it as a strategy. Like, you're not even talking about like, I want a mate, so I'm going to try in my career, and I'm going to try in this, and I'm going to try in that. It's just, even if you think that you're never going to get laid, you're not going to have any kind of a happy life as an incel or as someone with a relationship if you are defeatist about everything and don't get involved in things that you enjoy. And as you get involved in things that you enjoy and develop skills professionally or otherwise, like in a niche that's reasonable for you, not everybody has to be a genius astronaut or something like that. You could be like a very good carpenter or mechanic or whatever it is. But if you get involved in your community and you get involved in your work and you start having a social life, that one is going to make you more happy whether you end up with a mate or not, but two is the way to become more attractive. It's not about like going out and shooting shots over and over and over and over again.
Okay. But the thing is that if you try to imagine it practically, right? I mean, eventually, exhaustion does set in, and you do have to eventually accept the fact that, after a certain number of times, I just can't keep on trying because it's not good for my mental health. So I'm just gonna accept the bitter alternative if it means that I can save my energies
I think taking a rest
I guess
is a good strategy.
Why is it so bitter to not have a relationship or to not have sex?
Well, because this is a fundamental need, right? If you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, this is one of the more fundamental needs.
It's definitely different for women.
And it's,
I don't have a relationship. I'm not having sex with anyone. I don't really feel bitter about it, or I'm not really focused on getting a mate. I'm pretty happy just being busy with other things. I don't totally understand.
You're a woman, Ariel. For a man who hasn't had sex yet, there's a existential drive to not be a virgin anymore.
And also because men have higher testosterone, right? So we have a greater sex drive than women.
I would suspect it's less about being a woman or being a man and more about the fact that you may be single, but you're not, maybe you don't feel forcibly single, and everyone around you rejects you constantly, and that's why you're single, because you don't have any attraction value.
No, but I think there is.
I think it's
gender
different to feel
component to
single
this.
because everybody rejects you versus being single because you're busy with other things.
Or because you've rejected other people, I guess.
Right.
I think it's a case of like, other people rejecting me and not having like control over my situation. One, and also because, I mean, if I had control over my situation and I rejected others, sure. I mean, there would be like a sense of reassurance that I could do this if I tried. There's a kind of helplessness that comes with inceldom, like in a sense of despair because you don't like have control over your circumstances. Say you're autistic, right? I mean, if I'm autistic, which I'm not, but if I were, I would have a difficult time with communicating with other people, right? And that would like be a detriment to my ability to attract a mate, no matter how many times I tried, or no matter how much I devoted myself to becoming like a more complete person. So I mean, that just wouldn't work out. So I mean, that's how the notion of like laying down and rotting comes into play.
Yeah, see, I don't buy that. There's something attractive about
and there's only so much
a person who is making real tries and pushing ahead despite adversity is much more fun to be around than somebody who's just like,
you can.
I'm just going to give up and
be around.
things
Doesn't
are
mean that
hopeless.
person is making progress, right?
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
I will say that someone who's just extremely positive and keeps trying and trying and trying on something that they're obviously not going to succeed at is also like not fun to be around. Like if you have like a really short guy who's trying to become a professional basketball player and he's just super amped about it, or you see this one a lot, like a lot of people trying to be writers or trying to be artists, but they really don't have the talent, but they try and they try and they try and they try, and it's like, oh God, they wrote another screenplay. It's it's hard to be be around that. And at a certain point, you do kind of want to say like, do something else.
Yeah, I mean, it conveys foolishness,
I see the
right?
point.
It conveys foolishness and lack of awareness.
But I mean, I guess that the analog to the incel thing, and this sort of segues into a topic that I kind of want to cover, that I feel like we all sort of understand, but I want to get into a little bit for the audience, is like, maybe the analog for the incel thing is like, you know, one thing that's annoying with men is when they keep trying to go for the same woman over and over again.
Yeah.
So it's like, I don't want to date you, and then like you come back, I still don't want to date you. Like that can be very annoying. Or maybe a guy, he keeps trying to go for a woman of a certain level of physical attractiveness that maybe is unrealistic for him. Like,
yeah.
For the incels, like, why not just date less attractive women, or less I don't want to say attractive, less physically good looking women. That's the issue.
So some incels are willing to accept women who are like beneath them, but there are others who would not accept a woman who is at least not at a certain level for him.
I think that would be a vol cell then, right?
No, I mean,
if you were giving up.
That would be a standard cell. A vol cell is someone who is like.
But I'm saying you're foregoing an opportunity that you actually have.
Celibate. Let's just remember to define these terms. Is voluntary celibate.
Yeah, that sounds like you're making a choice, that you're saying, well, you know, I can do better than this, and so I'm just gonna stay a virgin, and that seems like
that's kind of a
not an incel.
That's kind of a vol cell or fake cell territory, I would say. But I mean, it could also be a case that, I mean, a vol cell could also be an incel in the sense that incel, when it comes to attracting women who are on his looks level, but vol cell because he won't accept someone who's below his looks level. So it's kind of both. So yeah.
I mean, so are you a virgin, John?
Yes.
Okay, and are there women that are just too unattractive for you to even try on?
Well, I mean, there are some women who are just like, I'm not willing to accept, but I mean, if you just sold out, if you were just like, I just want to have sex, could you do it? Could you find a woman that would do it with you? I mean, I could get a prostitute to do it with me. So,
okay, yeah, that's something.
Anyone could.
I understand not wanting to go for that option, though.
Yeah, that's a little bit different. That you're exchanging money,
right? But it is something, right? So maybe find the level. There's got to be a level that you can go for, is what I'm trying to say.
It's not a.
Well, that's not the same thing as actually having a woman be attracted to you. Like John, would you go for a woman who is like just less attractive than you?
I mean, someone who's below, like not too below my looks level. I wouldn't go beyond a certain point. No, I would not. No.
So,
okay, I'm going to explain the idea of hypergamy because I feel like we need it to have this conversation. It hasn't come up yet. So. there's this idea in the Blackpill and Redpill community that women are hypergamous.
Yes.
And so the idea is that women are only or mostly attracted to a small subset of men. The black pill will say it's based on looks. The red pill might say it's based on looks, status, confidence, and all these other proxy markers. And so the idea is that with monogamy, you have kind of like a forced equalizing where because there's only one woman for each man and one man for each woman, then people are sort of forced to settle in some way because women are half the population, men are half the population. Yeah. So everyone only gets one person kind of thing. Whereas now, as monogamy is broken down, you get situations where things are much looser. There's serial monogamy. So you have people can have a lot of partners that way. You have people sometimes having multiple partners at once, more adultery, that's more accepted. So you end up with a situation where a small subset of men who incels would call the Chads, or the black pillars would call the Chads and view them as being super attractive, are having sex with a lot of women. Yeah. So they're taking up now a lot of the pool of available women. I say this in quotes because this isn't my belief system, but it's my understanding of the black pill belief system.
Yes.
And so
that sounds right.
I mean, I think to some extent it is accurate, but so
well, you have, and there's data from OkCupid and other places that
I think on online dating in a lot of contexts it actually is probably accurate. But anyway, so in this idea, I don't think it's totally based on looks the way black pillars do, but anyway, I'll continue with the explanation. Yeah. So because a large number of the women are taken up by the Chads, you get fewer women available for the men underneath, say the Brads and the Normies. Yeah. And so they're having to settle for women below their attractiveness match, before their looks match. Yes. So let's say on the 1 to 10 scale, you have the 8, 9s, and 10s, who are the Chads among the men, taking up, let's say, the 5 to 10s among the women. So the men below that, let's say, who are the 4 to 7s among the men, are dating like the 2 to 4s among the women, or the 1 to 4s among the women. So that leaves like the 1 to 3s among the men with nobody. Yeah. That's the basic idea, right?
Yeah, that's the idea. It's a race to the bottom, essentially, for men.
Okay, and so that's why there's this idea that there's no real female incels, because
because by juggernaut law, what happens is that even low tier females can get men, because for men it's a race to the bottom.
Sorry, is that juggernaut law?
Yes. I mean, that's the way we understand it in the incel community.
There was this page on the incel wiki about juggernauting, and the idea is that like you have a woman who's not good looking at all, and she's still getting like dozens and dozens of messages from desperate men. Yeah. Who are more attractive than her physically, maybe, but who are more desperate because they're men. Is the idea.
Yeah, that's right. That sounds right.
So, do you guys think that, like, Chris and Katie, do you guys think this is how things really are?
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, in online dating, yes. When it comes to short-term relationships, yes. When it comes to time during our youth, especially when a lot of people are just dating casually or having hookups or flings, yeah, I think that's how it often plays out. When it comes to like when the game of musical chairs is over, like when people actually want to settle down and have relationships, I don't know. We're not living in a world with polygamy, and even if that was legal, I don't think we would see a situation where
but we
attractive
are
men had 5 wives or something like that.
But we are becoming like a more polygamous society, even though it's not going under the name of polygamy. We're having I
don't want to deny, like, I am very familiar with like polyamory and in the polyamorous community. I did notice like one of the most common arrangements when you were talking about not people who were dating independently, but when there were like groups of people, like polyamorous families with multiple partners who were all together, the most common arrangement by far was one man with multiple women.
Yeah, and also there was also this this new arrangement called cuckolding, right? Cuckolding is it's pretty common now, where you have a very attractive wife, and her SMV just can't be satisfied by the SMV of one man, so she just gets to have like multiple partners who are sexually more endowed than her husband, possibly.
But then, like, on the flip side, adultery is still more common among men than women, though only slightly.
Now it's like they did a bit of research and they found it like adultery is growing among women and slightly dropping among men, I think.
But here's the thing about this situation too, though. I mean, I agree sort of like sexually that distribution there's some truth to it. But when you look at like Katie said, like people settling down in relationships, you end up with a bit of a different picture. You end up with a picture where like those men who are like the chads, the top of the barrel for whatever reason, like a lot of very sought after men are less and less, are more and more reluctant to settle down in relationships. And
yeah, but
you almost have an opposite. Let me finish. You almost have an opposite situation where it's okay, where there's like in the relationship pool, there's like some men who are now removed from the relationship pool, and then you have a situation where it's almost like you can almost see a desperation among women for relationships, or there could be a greater desperate. And you see this often, like women. To be crude, women often sleep up and date down.
Yeah. It's kind of a crude way of putting it, but also we've been kind of making the assumption throughout this, especially when we're talking about the scales and like matching up the quote unquote 1s to 10s in the men with the 1s and 10s to the women. Like we're assuming that men and women are or should be like equally sexually attractive, and like that this distribution is fair. But like when you look at like education levels among women are going up, income levels among women are going up, and unemployment levels for men are going down or are going up, and education levels for men are comparatively to women going down. So it's not just like women are just rejecting people who are well matched to them. For a lot of women in a lot of socioeconomic statuses, there are not a high enough number of men with similar socioeconomic status to match the number of successful women.
Yeah, but also we have to take into consideration of the fact that women often go for degrees that are not that high paying, and also like just because they're college graduates doesn't necessarily mean that they're getting better jobs.
This is true, but I mean, let's look at like the percentage of men in prison.
But they don't need a man to support them.
Like we can probably assume that like most women who are not in prison and have never been in prison do not want to date men who are in prison. And there's way more men in prison than women who are in prison. And there are like way more male drug addicts and like way more there's a much higher percentage of men who are doing things that would like absolutely disqualify them from relationships with most normal women than there are women doing those sorts of things.
And there's a lot of women who have great jobs. I mean, you know, there's more new female doctors than male new doctors. There's a joke among medical students. It's like, crap, I can't remember it. If it comes back to me, I'll remember it.
Also,
yeah, but I think the point stands that that women are becoming a lot more successful comparatively to men these days, and so what that's doing is it's taking away their motivation to settle with some man for the long term because they don't need a man to support them financially.
No, but also like
the idea is basically like if you're a male doctor, you can like you have lots of dating opportunities, whereas if you're a female doctor, you have few.
Yeah.
Also, like women need a man with more earning potential or like greater earnings or better job to feel like an attraction, and it's just and the attraction is killed if the man like earns less or compared to the woman.
I mean, isn't this part of the Incel argument that as women are making more money and more independent, they're focusing more on looks and less on money?
Yeah, I mean, they're focusing on looks more because they don't need a man to provide for them, right? And also just back to my point about women earning more. Women are earning a lot more, but also we have to take into consideration that a lot of women are also getting a lot of opportunities from all the companies that are reserved for women simply because they are women, which men don't have, and also men are also still doing all the trade professions like construction and the heavy lifting, all of that's still done by men. So now
this sounds like a lot of stereotypes about how things are that we're not really. I want to get back to this idea of dating. So this idea, I guess I'm trying to figure out the bigger point that you're making is basically that.
Like it's harder for men. That's what I'm trying to say.
Okay, it's harder for men because women have more opportunities professionally, and they already have an advantage in time. I'm trying to understand what the point is.
Because men already have to do all the heavy lifting work, like in this.
like when it comes to mining or sewers or all that stuff.
Men have to do a lot of blue-collar jobs, Men have to do a lot of blue-collar jobs. White-collar jobs are available to both men and women.
Yeah.
And women have to do the bulk of the reproductive labor, bearing a child.
But they don't always do that anymore.
And raising it.
They
have to be the ones who are pregnant.
Okay.
So I think one thing we should bring up is that the distribution of men and women is different for any given skill. Basically, the average is generally about the same, unless it's a job that involves strength.
Okay, I don't want to keep getting on this. Maybe let's get back to that track of reproduction because I think that's a little bit more relevant.
Can I just finish what I'm saying? So basically, the distribution of men is wider than the distribution of women. Women kind of bunch up towards the middle, whereas men have this longer tail where the more they're like on the high end, there's way more men, and on the low end, there's way more men. And so I think it's important to point out that probably the men at the bottom of the distribution for any given thing are having a harder time than any of the women. And I think that's a fair thing to say.
All right, I want to get back to the previous point.
I don't have I have to think about that before I can just answer it. I guess I'll have to get back to you on that later, I guess.
Okay. But I want to get back to, sorry guys, Chris and John, I want to get back to a previous point because I feel like we're getting on a tangent here pretty far out. So John, we're bringing it back to reproductive labor, and I was pointing out that women have to do all the reproductive labor, and you kind of responded that women aren't having as much kids anymore. And how does that fit in?
So, if the fertility rate is dropping, women have emancipated themselves from the obligations of family and children, right? So they're just not having children. So they're not bearing the reproductive burden. So they're
not having children as much as before, but they're also working.
And is the birth rate down?
No, but they're not working that hard as men. They're not working as hard as men.
Okay, so you think women are... Okay, so basically you're thinking women are kind of just phoning it in the workworkplace and not really producing much value, and they're not having kids, and they're just having fun. Dating all the Chads and...
Yeah, that's what I think, yeah, basically.
I don't even know where to start responding to that. It just seems like a very misogynistic worldview.
Well, how would you respond?
Women just have an easier time living, right? There's just no way to deny this. Women have an easier time.
I would absolutely deny that women do not have an easier time living.
Women have an easier time living because...
Women have to face all kinds of crap that men have to deal with. I sent you the page on violence against women.
I looked at it. I know all these things, but is there really much violence against women today, as there was in the past?
25% of female children are sexually abused. 25%. It's a quarter of all women in North America and globally are sexually abused as children, and that's only one form of violence against women. You also have rape against adult women, abuse. You have intimate partner violence in relationships, women being sex trafficked, which still happens a lot. You have all kinds of crap, and those are all things that happen in the Western world. If you want to talk in the non-Western world, there's all kinds of stuff that happens too.
Women are just not
child brides, genital mutilation, women being forced to pulled out of education at a much higher rate than boys. Girls being pulled out of education at a much higher rate than boys. Illiteracy being higher among girls than among boys globally. Things are very hard for women in many ways. I don't think you're really taking the female perspective into account.
Okay. Let's just think of it this way. So first of all, women aren't the only ones who suffer abuse. Men also suffer a lot of abuse. They have to go through a lot of violence. They have higher expectations. They're put under greater standards because there's greater expectation to produce more, be of more value, and also they do get into a lot of fights, and so there is a fair bit of violence. If you look at the non-Western world, there's a lot of young boys are subjected to violence at the hands of their parents, and so look, the cycle of violence is it goes from generation to generation, and women are not the only ones, and women aren't the only ones who get mutilated genitally, right? Here in North America, there's a lot of genital mutilation for men too, and also I think. Look, in terms of education, yeah, sure. In the Middle East, you can argue that women are pulled out of education, but for that, they are also protected a lot, right? From the all the things in the world, and so if they're married off at a young age, or they're married off even at a later age, they don't have to deal with a lot of the things. They don't have to figure out a lot of the stuff. They can just stay under the comfort of their man. Sure, that entails suffering some sexual violence, domestic violence, but I mean, that's I mean, I don't want to call it this, but it is kind of still a good trade-off for women, because I mean, they still get to live comfortably under their man. And even in the Western world, they'll just say women will say that they're very feminist and very independent. But the reality is that women are just as dependent on men as they were back in the day, except for the fact that now we have taxation. We have taxation, and we have leftist governments who tax men a lot and make them mandatory, force them to pay for a lot of the services, of which women invoke a lot of the services that are just being funded by taxpayer money from men. And it's been shown statistically that women are the net consumers of tax money, and men are the net producers of tax money. So I can link you to that statistic. I think I already did that, but I think I can do it again for this podcast. And also that men are also enslaved by the government and the court system to pay a lot of child alimony. And sure, I mean, sometimes it's the man's fault when he abandons the family, and so therefore he should be rightly obligated to pay for their children and their spouse. But a lot of the times, the divorce or the separation is invoked by the woman. So and even in that case, you still have to continue providing for your spouse and your children. And a lot of the time, the spousal support or the child support is wasted on frivolous things like cosmetics or any other kind of thing. So I mean, men have a hard time. I'm not gonna lie. Men still have to work pretty hard. If you look at civilization itself, men pretty much built civilization, man. I mean, all the innovations were done by women, and feminists can argue that, I mean, if women were given the opportunity to study science and engineering, yeah, they would do it too. But you know what? That's just a lot of bullshit, because you know what? Women have equal opportunity today to go into the sciences, and you know what? I still see in Silicon Valley. I still see it's majority men. Men are still doing most of the heavy labor.
Well, not in medicine, but I mean, okay, there's a few things.
So this section was troublesome for us. We basically allowed him to spout out 7 MRA talking points, and it clearly leaving us in a situation where it's impossible for us to respond. We decided to leave those talking points in for intellectual honesty. I will say that we don't agree that it supports his contention that women have it easier than men. Definitely some of the things he brought up, like circumcision, are real issues. It's still extremely difficult to quantify whether circumcision in the West or female genital mutilation in other parts of the world, like, what's worse? Is it the number of people affected? Is it how bad it is? Getting into a rabbit hole here. Yeah, I mean, it's just really difficult to quantify these issues and compare them to a lot of the issues that were brought up before. One issue that I really did want to address is this idea of child alimony. I'll link an article below that I wrote arguing that the issue is a lot more complicated than what a lot of MRAs make it out to be. I mean, alimony itself is paid towards the person who's the lower wage earner, so it's not gender specific. Child support often is in practice gender specific, with the father paying child support towards the mother. And MRIs argue that that's because of courtroom discrimination, but there's actually a lot of evidence that fathers overwhelmingly in a divorce choose not to take guardianship over their children. It's a freely made choice, not something decided by courts, which really undermines this MRA talking point that child support awarded towards women is based on discrimination. I argue there's a strong element of father's choice going on in the matter. So I'll link some links to that below, and let's get on with the episode.
I'm not trying to trivialize the challenges that men face, and neither is any of us. I don't think.
But I am
you're the one who said it's easier for women.
Yeah, it is, and women have an easier time. Yes, they do.
No, it's you can't quantify that. I mean,
No, yeah,
okay.
yes,
There's
I
a lot
can.
of there's a lot of things you said there, but I think the thing that I really want to focus on is your defense of the way that women are treated in the Middle East. I think that's just so shocking. Women. Do you approve of a system where women are basically enslaved?
No, I mean,
I don't. Protected?
No, I don't. But that doesn't discount the fact that women do receive the benefits of living a protected and sheltered life. Are you going to deny that women benefit from being provided?
I'm going to deny that it's better to live as a protected slave than as a free individual who has to face the risks of living fully in the world. Yes, I'm going to deny that that's a beneficial system.
I mean, okay, but it doesn't deny the fact that they still benefit from it, right? I mean, and
that's a very strange thing to say. Like, you could say that about any form of slavery. You could say, are you going to deny that the slave benefits from the free food? Like, I guess it's better than being enslaved and not receiving your sustenance. But I think it's odd to call that a benefit.
I guess so. I mean, I understand what you're saying, but I mean, but at the same time, and you have to take into consideration that, I mean, just because men are free, it doesn't mean that men aren't subject to suffering. And just because you're enslaved or you're protected, doesn't mean that you're like automatically like bound to suffering, right? I mean, the being free also brings a lot of suffering in the sense that you have to deal with the chaos of figuring stuff out. You have to deal with the chaos of interacting. You have to you might have to deal with violence. You might have to deal with a host of things. So, like, a sheltered life versus being free in the open and and having like a lot of like a freedom to go on exploring, that also brings a lot of suffering as well. And this is what existentialists call, like, you know, there's this phenomenon among in existentialism where, I mean, you know, where they say that human beings are condemned to be free. You know, I don't agree with that entirely, but I mean, in this instance, I can actually explain it pretty well because, I mean, if you're free, then you have to figure out a lot of things. It's not easy. You're not given a guidance system. You have to figure it out. So
are you saying you would rather be unfree? You would rather be kind of just a slave, but all your basic needs would be taken care of?
I don't think we are free to begin with. So it's not a question of whether I would be free or not. We are slaves to our desires, right? And we are slaves to how much we can improve in our
I don't think we're slaves to our desesires.
No, we are.
I think we can control our desires.
No, I
think we have free will, and we can decide which things that we want.
Can you transcend the desire to eat?
Chris, can you transcend the desire to eat?
yeah, John. I didn't eat for 21 days.
No, but I mean, at some point you're just gonna die, right? You realize that, right?
Sure, but
you
cannot do it for 21 days. So if I cannot eat for 21 days,
you can't necessarily transcend your biological limitations, but you can transcend your desires. Like, Chris didn't eat after 21 days because the desire overcame him. He made a decision.
Exactly. And when I went back to eating, it wasn't because I desired to eat. It's because I was like, okay, 21 days seems like enough. And it was weird to go back to eating, actually. No. It was like, I forgot how to do this.
No, you were compelled to go back to eating because if you did not, your organs would be failing, right?
Yeah, but that's different from the desire. That, right? That's different from the desire.
I didn't have a desire for food.
That's still a desire, right? A compulsion is still a kind of desire.
No, it's a logical necessity for survival. That's different.
Chris was conscious, not compulsive. There's a difference between conscious desire and compulsive desire. I learned this from a Sadhguru. Compulsive desire is when you're just being pulled left and right everywhere by your desires all the time, and that's sort of the kind of desire that all the great traditions tell you not to have. But conscious desire is when you have a desire, you're able to, like, roll it in or roll it out depending on the context.
It's still, like, I mean, at the underlying level, it's still kind of biological if you think about it. If you think, like, we have conscious, like, we are rational, we have we have a lot of freedom in our thinking, but we actually don't. I mean, it's all, like, predetermined. It's all, like, based off something else that's coming, that's already happened in your mind and the back of your mind. And that's leading you up to this point where you actually think you're actually choosing to do something, but you actually don't have choice at all. Like,
I disagree.
I mean, there's a study that was done, and neuroscience showed that humans are 90% predictable, and you could deny that.
Like, okay, I agree that there's always I always have some kind of desire that I'm trying to fulfill. But, you know, it's not like I just have this overwhelming desire for sex, and so therefore, like, that takes precedence over everything. or I have this overwhelming desire for, I don't know, to earn money, or I don't know what we're talking about here. Food.
Yeah, I mean,
I can arrange my desires as I want, because I have full control over them.
Sure, but I mean, those are still there. I mean, those are
yes, that's what it means to be alive. Like
no,
if I didn't have any desires, I would just be dead. What's the point of that?
It seems like, John, like this is where like the Blackpill ideology just seems so impoverished to me. Like, just when you get this idea that, like, it just seems like you're just taking like base desires and pedestalizing them, where it's like to the point where you say it's good to be it's okay to be a slave if you get food and protection and shelter.
But we are slaves. Like we are slaves. I mean, that's what most people deny.
No. If you want to be free, you can go out and take responsibility for yourself and be as free as you want. But it takes responsibility and it takes hard work.
And that is the choice that women have made in the West.
No, but
they're making in a lot of other places as well. That is the choice that women have made historically. Women did have a subordinate position only a few generations ago. Women did have, maybe it was more protection, maybe there was more security. I'm not convinced there was, but maybe they were provided for more consistently.
Women are still provided for more consistently.
Women in this part of the world made the choice. Women in this part of the world made the choice to be free instead, to have freedom and to have opportunity and independence.
No. What women did was they subordinated men, and they just how
does it subordinate men for me to go out and have a career and do what I want to do and not have sex with them? How does that hurt men?
Okay. Here's what it does. I mean, first of all, women have selected leftist governments. They've raised the taxation, and now men have to compulsory for men to give a section of their money, give 40-30% of their money, although all the way to the government, most of which is thrown into administrative work and is thrown into all these services, from which mostly women take benefit. Women are often employed in these positions because they don't want to live under a man, but they'd rather live under a daddy government. I mean, women are not free. Women are convinced that they're free. Women are convinced that they are independent when they're not, when they're still dependent on men. Because men did most of the innovations. Men created most of the things. And sure, women were given the rights.
Women were raising the children.
John, I want to ask you: Are you a net tax producer?
Okay, so I think that was one of the worst mistakes of the episode. Actually, basically, we just let him totally flame out feminism and the status of women in society, and then. Yeah, Katie and I were both going to respond, and then Chris, you asked him if he was you talked over us, asked if he was a net tax producer or not, and then we never got back to it. For me, that was one of the most painful parts of the episode. I should have been more assertive. I should have been like, no, we got to address this, but...
Yeah, that part is brutal.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I made a mistake there. It seemed like a good point at the time, but I guess it wasn't.
Well, how do we want to address this point? How do we want to address this portion of the episode? I don't believe in what he said, but I think that the points that he made are an important and valid response to feminist narratives, and I honestly have not put the effort into being able to integrate what I think about the issue. And I just haven't. I do think that he has a valid point that, I don't know, but I mean, we're talking about on a societal level. On an individual level, many women are liberated and many women are completely taking care of themselves. And completely net tax positive and da. I think we're collectivizing things too much, but I mean, it is I do agree that largely the role of the father has been replaced by the state, and it has been mostly women voting in those policies to make that happen.
Jesus. Okay. Okay.
I mean, women overwhelmingly vote for more social welfare programs, and with that, men being providers for the family have gone down.
I have heard a statistic that's single parent households were like 23% or something like that in the 50s or 70s or something like that, and now it's like 70. It's like higher than 70%. Like fatherless homes.
Okay, so the argument basically is that so we see the rise in single parent households, and the idea is that this is being spurred by women seeking welfare.
I wouldn't say spurred by women seeking welfare. Maybe that's how he would frame it.
That's Black households, by the way. I don't know what the statistic is overall.
Basically, he's saying that women did not become financially liberated and financially independent. They just basically kicked the men out of the houses and started taking money.
Which was being paid for. Which was being paid for by the men.
Yeah, that's his argument. And I mean, like, the thing is, like, this wasn't a plot, but I can't argue that like materially it's kind of true. I don't know how to argue against.
But you can tell the story in different ways, right? Like, you can tell it as a story of male irresponsibility as well, right? Or like this phenomenon of like men choosing to negate their parental responsibilities, which legally is definitely challenging for men. It's not practically difficult for men to do if they're low income. It's very easy for men to negate their parental responsibilities. And it's not those men, and those men aren't the ones like paying for, it's not even middle class men. If anything, you could call it kind of economic hypergamy, where there's like a small subclass of, I guess, the wealthiest men and women, but probably mostly men, paying a lot of taxes, and then those taxes are like, fertilizing the children of the underclasses who are by and large being abandoned by their fathers.
Yeah, I mean, not just the wealthiest classes, also the upper middle class and middle class.
Depends which country you're in.
Yeah.
Whether the middle class benefit from taxes or net lose from taxes.
Sure. That's not like a really pretty story that I want to articulate and tell either.
I mean, you can tell a story also that's like more based in compassion. I mean, the reality is, 150 years ago, wealthy men were not paying as much taxes to support impoverished women, but you also had impoverished women like dying of tuberculosis on the streets, or like rotting away from syphilis in like, poorhouses and gutters, and children packed into orphanages. Like, you had a lot of like really nasty things happening 150 years ago that we don't have now because we have expensive medical technology and social welfare for women and children.
Yeah, and I mean, you have to ask, like, being a single mom on benefits is not, it's not an enjoyable situation. It's not easy to care for children without a partner. Like, if women are en masse choosing to leave their partners to receive small amounts of, and receiving small amounts of social welfare to get by, like, maybe that indicates that the men were not so helpful, or perhaps even abusive on large scales.
That's another argument also, is it's allowing women to leave abusive men. But
yeah.
It's unlikely that, like, what is it? Like you said, like 70% of Black households are single parent households. It's unlikely that that's entirely due to abuse.
No, that's mostly due to pregnancies outside of wedlock.
I guess the leftist view on this is that these problems were already there before the welfare, like abusive relationships and subpar health and poverty and all this stuff, and that welfare just provided a way to address them and make them more visible. And so now we're seeing the ugliness, but the actual ugliness has gone down. And the right-wing argument for what's happening is injecting the money into the system has created these moral hazard, these toxic incentives where you're incentivizing, where something was less of a problem before, you're incentivizing people to act in a way that's more problematic. And so you're seeing the ugliness, and the ugliness has actually gotten worse. It's festered.
What's the behavior that you're talking about? What's the
example
perverse
would be
behavior?
women choosing single motherhood to get higher government benefits, just something the right argues happens. The left would more tend to argue that you already had women who were single mothers before, or you already had women who were in situations that were comparably bad to that kind of single motherhood, and that welfare just helps them improve their situation a bit.
Right. Right. This is the problem I have against almost all government intervention, which is that, like, in the short term, it solves some, maybe very serious problem, but in the long term, it creates these perverse incentives that encourage people to do all sorts of nasty things.
It's unclear, right? It's unclear who's right.
I think they're both right. I think it's pretty clear that both of them contain elements of truth and that both dynamics are real.
Yeah, that's kind of what I think. I take the integral.
What do we think? What do we think of him blaming this on women?
I wouldn't blame this on women. I think that the situation as it was before was only tenable when women were oppressed. But I don't think that the single family household with the man at the head of it and the woman not having many rights and not having rights to leave and not having the ability to provide for herself and not having an alternative is something that should be argued for. And I think that once there were alternatives, like women working for themselves, and then later, once welfare became more of a factor, the fact that so many women chose to leave when being a working parent is hard and welfare is not a comfortable amount of money indicates that the home lives of these women was not great. You can, I don't think it's fair to blame women. I think if you look at past media about, the way that it was normal to talk about how hard and when is it okay to hit your wife when she's misbehaving and stuff like that, it shows that it wasn't a healthy society, and we shouldn't be surprised that it got broken up.
Yeah, I mean, I think his position is misogynistic and immature.
I agree with what Katie's saying. I think there's also an element of technology to look at, not to be technologically deterministic, because I don't agree with that perspective either, but there was a lot of technological advances that happened in many different domains that made the old situation untenable. It went from where at the beginning of the 20th century, caring for a home was a full-time job, washing all the clothes by hand and, making the bread, rolling out the bread, it took all day or more. Whereas in the 1950s, there was all these high-tech futuristic gadgets that made it so a machine washes your dishes, and a machine washes your clothes, and a machine does everything. So the role of the housewife became very minimal and very low IQ. There's also medical technology where, these days, human being medical care for their lives is a very large amount of money, hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions. Whereas that obviously wasn't the case. Even if you're adjusting for dollar value, medical care was obviously extremely cheap in the 19th century compared to what it is now. And you also have stuff like the birth control pill, which allowed for more sexual freedom for both genders. So I think we got to take that into account too. It would be hard to construct a world that was. It would be hard to construct a world that included these old-fashioned gender values with modern technology. I guess they do that in the Middle East. I guess people still do manage it, but it takes a lot more totalitarianism to accomplish that. There's so much we can keep talking about. How long do you have to stay here, John?
I'd rather not stay much long because I need to rest a bit.
Yeah, let's wrap this up. Are there points? Okay. One topic that I would like to talk about before we wrap up is just the what can we do about this question? If we're in the Blackpill mindset, it's just there's something very fatalistic about it. I'm sure you would agree, John. But
yeah,
what should be done, both on an individual level and a societal level?
I think societal level, we have to recognize that we have responsibilities to each other. And you know how the saying goes, like, that's been adopted in the past, like, I would say 10 years. I mean, you can do whatever you want as long as you don't harm others. Well, your actions do have consequences. I think even if you're taking actions independently, you still set an example and you still create an influence that, I mean, has a reverberation throughout, like, all the social networks. And so I think we do have a social responsibility, not just to ourselves, but also to others. And I think the first step is to recognize that. I think, and the second thing is to recognize that we need to stop prioritizing instant gratification, and we need to stop spending so much of our time and energy on, like, how we look, and so that we can recognize, like, the humanity within, and this means, like, just spending less time on social media, because if you're on social media and we what we're doing is that we're just prioritizing the visual aspects of our entire being a bit too much for my liking. Third, lastly, I would say we should be kinder to others, and even if they're not the most advantaged, I don't know, in whatever shape or form. But I don't think that's going on too much, because right now, if a person doesn't really meet our standards, that person is promptly rejected. I mean, I don't think it should be that way. I mean, and I think these steps alone would help in Inceldom. Lastly, I mean, it would be nice to have some kind of socially sanctioned monogamy, in the sense that, I mean, it would be nice if people in society and like in all the communities, we would try to achieve, like, some kind of a long-term relationship with every relationship, and in doing so, trying to make our situation, like, our dating circumstance a little less fickle and a little less chaotic.
So you mentioned being kinder to people who are less advantaged, but you mentioned that there are girls that are so ugly that you wouldn't get with them. So would you apply that philosophy to yourself?
I mean, yeah, sure.
In
I mean,
situations?
it applies to me too, because, I mean, right now, I mean, even though I'm a victim of lookism, I mean, I've also become very lookist myself, because I guess, I mean, that kind of thinking has seeped into my mentality, because I guess when you fight a monster, you kind of become a monster yourself, and it's that kind of an analogy here. So yeah, I mean, I would do well to look beyond looks as well.
I mean, it's interesting the kinds of suggestions that you make that you think might make things better, because, like, when I spent time on the incel forums, kindness was not a word that I would use to describe what I was seeing there. It was one of the most, like, bitter, hateful places
I mean, what happens is that people who are posting here, like, they are kind of mirroring the world that they've been made victims of. So they're kind of mirroring the harshness of the world. So
it sounds like they need to stop doing that.
Yeah, I mean, would you say that they've been made victims of it, or? I would say that I think it's more of a feedback loop. Like, you get rejected, you become bitter, and then when you project a bitter attitude towards the world rejects you more. And if you don't interrupt that loop at some point, you'll spiral to an extremely dark place, which is what we see with a lot of these people.
Yeah, exactly.
And I mean, to me, the whole incel, I mean, being involuntary celibate is a condition, but what I see in the groups that I visited, when I peek in there, like, this whole incel movement seems to be just, like, the product of the worst spiral that you could go down.
Yeah, sure, there is a feedback loop, but you have to also take into consideration that, I mean, how much rejection did one person go through to initiate that feedback loop, right? Say you suffer rejection once, but then, I mean, later you get into another interaction and you don't suffer one rejection, so the weight of the first rejection that you suffered is lessened, right, by the good outcome in the second interaction. But if you suffer repeated interactions throughout a course of a time, then a feedback loop, like a vicious feedback loop, is bound to be initiated, like a negative vicious feedback loop. Like it's just
right,
inevitable.
but that's not a desirable situation, right? I mean, you've heard
Yeah.
you've heard
Well,
the
it's not
expression what goes around comes around, right?
No, but it's not in your control because I mean, at that point, after you've suffered like quite a bit of rejection, then it's just not in your hands anymore, right? I mean,
What are you saying that you experience so much rejection that you can't be nice to people anymore?
no, I mean, you just become bitter about life, and it's just not possible. I mean, anymore. I mean, then and of course,
I disagree. I think you can always be nice to people regardless of the hardship that you've experienced.
No, I mean, these people, I mean, the incels that you see interact in the community, yeah, they're not nice to, like, I mean, they're expressing their views, like in a virtual world. They would never really say these things in the real world. So, I mean, this is the place where the people come to vent about their life situation and be honest with themselves, like and with others as well. But this is something that they cannot do in the real world. So in the real world, they have to put on a mask and act all cordial and nice, and sometimes they'll just they won't say anything that's distasteful or like classless. But I mean, that pent up anger or frustration is still inside them. So this is where they get to express it, and that's why it kind of looks even more like it looks worse than it probably might have in the real world than it might have.
I can see how that could be true.
I mean, it's like there's a certain element of it. Like there's all kinds of stories of people who are tortured and maintain their compassion. Like it's big in the Christian tradition, and there's people who, forgive their abusers, and there's people who, go through all kinds of horrible things in their lives, and like there's in historic, like, black people who went through slavery and then went on to, like, be,
and black people are bitter towards white
and
people.
Underground Railroad. Like, there's people who go through horrible things and still maintain their character and maintain their compassion and
I mean, that's just too magnanimous, right?
Their kindness.
I mean, that's just...
like is the incel situation really so bad that you can't maintain virtue and, like, an upward facing?
Well, I think what he was saying was the incel subreddit, these incel communities especially.
I understood that point, but they still think that. That's still the mentality, even if they're hiding it among other people.
Well, I would say that John has been cordial in this conversation, and I think what he's saying is that, incels do go out and try and be nice and try to be compassionate. It's just like that particular...
My question isn't about cordiality. I'm sure incels are cordial in real life. My question is about the mindset, which I do see the forums being an honest expression of, even if that mindset is suppressed socially elsewhere. Like, is that I question this idea that the mindset is completely warranted by the situation. It seems to me that people get through far more brutal situations. Still maintain their character in a more.
No, it's just what I told Katie. I mean, the mindset is something that the incels arrive at after a certain period of rejection. I mean, maybe they discovered the forum well into maybe their mid-20s, before which they've already been rejected, or maybe they've had bad life experiences with people, or maybe it's not just like multiple rejections. Maybe it's just one or two big rejections that really hurt them and really set the chain. So,
I don't think it's inevitable. I don't think it's inevitable to form a negative mindset when you've been rejected. Like, some people can.
No, it's not inevitable.
You can choose how to interpret events, but I do acknowledge that it's hard. Like, people who are hurt and abused are more likely to become abusers themselves. There's a lot of people who transcend that, and that doesn't mean that we should condone it. But I don't think that should prevent us from understanding, like, the link and the causes of why people become this way.
It's not as big an effect as people used to think it is. The abuser cycle, but. I mean, I understand. I get where the incels are coming from. I mean, I think most of us would probably be lying if we said we haven't felt bitterness towards an ex or towards someone who's rejected us. Like, I think that's a pretty understandable reaction and a common one. And I can understand that if that's, a whole lifetime of having only harsh rejection. I understand how that can produce a bitter attitude. Like, I understand where it can come from.
Like, and it's also not just rejection. It's also, like, how society views us. Like, society doesn't really try to understand some of the problems that we're going through, and there's just not enough empathy, and there's just a feeling that we are all alone. So that just amplifies our malice, like, whatever we feel. That's also a point here. And also, like going back to my point, it's not just one or two rejections, or maybe it's just one or two big rejections or big like events that happened in someone's life. But it's like more like continuous rejection, continuously being ignored, continuously like being mistreated, or maybe just given certain looks of contempt and like maybe some discrimination and a corresponding lack of bonds to compensate for that. And there's no support network, so that just amplifies everything. There's this feeling of loneliness.
Okay, I think this is a good place to go ahead, Chris. Do you want to find
I just want to say, like, I totally connect with that. I used to be essentially, an incel, I guess, before that was considered a thing. I lost my virginity right before my 21st birthday, which was pretty late, but actually, compared to a lot of guys, it's actually pretty early, I guess. And before that happened, it really was a different world for me. It was like, it was kind of tied up in my sense of self-worth. And so I can understand the perspective, and I can understand that there's anger and bitterness and resentment. And I can just say that you gotta work through it, and you gotta keep trying, and you gotta stay hopeful, because if you don't, then you'll end up, the prophecy that you believe in is going to end up fulfilling itself.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, this is like part of the reason I've been so quiet this whole time is because like this is kind of messing with me. In my view, probably like the best thing that any incel could do for themselves would be to get off those forums.
I completely agree.
Yeah, but at the same time,
the more that you talk to people and go like, yeah, women suck, women are terrible, the more you're going to confirm in your mind that that's actually true, and the more you're going to actually lose hope, and you're going to actually lower your chances.
No, but at the same time, we don't have anywhere else to go. I mean, a lot of us don't have nobody's going to relate to our experiences. So, I mean, the incel community is one place where we can relate to each other. So that's very important too.
Right. What I'm saying is I can relate to those experiences because I used to be like that.
No, but I mean, I guess in my opinion, you're not empathizing enough with the condition of inceldom, in the sense that it is very genetic and immutable, and you're just saying that it's something that can be overcome with trying. But
yeah, I'm saying is,
I think trying can only get you so far.
And what I'm saying is that exact mindset is what's going to cause you to fail. Have you ever heard the expression, you miss 100% of the shots that you don't take?
No, I mean...
I'm not saying that you will definitely succeed, but I'm saying that you will definitely fail if you don't try.
Sure, I mean, there's only so many times you can try, even if you do try. Like, given the limitations that we have as, human beings, in our energy levels, that's just not possible, right? I mean, you can't just go on...
No, if your energy levels are low, I would say focus on that. No, I would say don't focus on dating and focus on energy levels.
You can't try on exhaustively. Eventually you just have to, acknowledge the fact that, yes, you are at a certain level, and yes, that level is not good enough. And that's just the way it is, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's just so difficult for human beings to accept that they have less control than they actually do.
I guess not all things that would help are exhausting. I understand this, especially if you're depressed and if you're in a low place, and the idea of even getting out of bed or going to work or whatever, everything seems exhausting and depleting. And it probably sounds nonsensical, but there's a way to get into a positive feedback loop where in your professional life and social life and things of this nature, it's not depleting. It's not just you're going out and trying and doing things that make you feel happy should be energizing, and also will make you more attractive.
No, but I mean, if the result you're getting is not to your liking, are you still going to remain as happy in your next trial?
I think there is a lot of truth to what you're saying, John. It's not The Secret. It's not you can just manifest any outcome that you possibly want. Looks do matter a lot. Inborn traits do matter a lot. Unfortunately, they do matter a lot in this world.
And we have no control over them, and that's the problem.
Yeah, there's stuff that we have no control over and that matter a lot, and that's really unfair. And that's part of the tragedy of the world. But there's stuff that we have control over too. There's stuff that matters a lot that we have control over too. And I really would encourage you to check out Carol Dweck and Mindsets, because part of what she talks about is how, depending on your mindset, if you have a fixed mindset and you're just so focused on all that matters is my inborn traits, and I'm just going to see if I have the necessary inborn traits, then every failure is like a dagger. Whereas if you focus more on building your skills and on stuff that you do have control over, then failures don't feel that way. Like, I mean, I know for myself, like, there's a lot of things that are really important to me that I don't always succeed at. I try a lot of things and I don't always get outcomes that are to my liking. But when I'm in that mindset of like the growth mindset of I'm on a path towards something, and each time, and I'm building my skill with everything I do, those failures don't really sting as much. It's just something to learn from.
Yeah, and the most important thing is you have to be patient. You have to realize that you might not actually get any results for like a long time, but if you stick with it, eventually you will start seeing results.
Okay, I guess I just can't go on debating this because I mean there's only so much I can argue with, so I mean I don't know.
Yeah,
I guess
we get it. I know you probably think we have like this, we're trapped in the blue pill mindset and we don't really see how it is.
I mean, unless you have actually lived the life of an incel, of a genetically like subhuman person, it's just difficult.
We didn't even talk about the race stuff. It's also this whole subhuman thing is just, we don't need to keep debating for long. But this whole subhuman thing, the idea that some people are genetically subhuman or that white people are somehow genetically superior, like that, like it just, I feel like I just gotta say that is just like such a, there's something very bizarre and
no, it's not bizarre at all.
Unconscionable about that.
No, it's not bizarre because if you look at history, it just tells you that white people were significantly more advanced. They had the Renaissance and they had the Industrial Revolution.
You know, we don't agree on this. I think it's pretty clear that the success of Western civilization relative to other civilizations and cultures isn't a glut of genetically superior people. Okay, we got to go. I'm going to wrap this up. Okay. So,
but thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us on this episode. I'm sure we could all keep talking about this for another 10 hours, but this is all the time we have for today.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's definitely been interesting.
It's been interesting. It's been interesting.
It's been interesting and rough, but thank you.
Thanks for coming along on this ride.
Thank you.
I hope you found this content valuable. Yeah, thanks for coming, John. We really appreciate you. It takes some courage to do this, so we really respect you being here.
Just don't dox me.
No.
We're not going to dox you. Don't
we
worry.
can't because we don't.
Thank you, John.
Okay, thank you.
Okay,
have a good day. Yes.
All right, you too.
So again, thanks for doing this. Take care, everyone.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay. We made it. We made it through. We hope you, I wouldn't want to say enjoyed, but had some kind of intense experience along with us. Thank you for making it this far. And yes, I can safely say we've all learned a lot about incels and about the world. And please join us again next time. Like, subscribe, comment. Please do comment and let us know what you think and about this content and how we handled it. Take care.
Thanks for joining us on the Multiversity Project. We hope you found this episode both mind-bending and enjoyable.
We can be found all over the social media space and at multiversityproject.co.
If you like this content, give us a like, comment, follow, share, or support us on Patreon.
Catch you on the flip side.
Don't dissociate, Katie.